The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. Death came gently to Grandmaster Luke Skywalker. He felt it approach like an old friend, the Force itself welcoming him home after decades of service, of teaching, of guiding the next generation through their trials. His students surrounded his bed, their young faces wet with tears, their presences in the Force like candles flickering in a vast cathedral of light. "Master," one whispered, "please don't go." Luke smiled, his weathered hand finding hers. "I'm not going anywhere. The Force connects us all. I'll always be with you." His eyes closed. The transition was supposed to be peaceful, a gentle fading into luminescence, becoming one with the cosmic energy that bound all living things together. Instead, something seized him, a violent, wrenching sensation, like invisible hands grabbing his consciousness and yanking it backward through time itself. Stars streaked past in reverse. Galaxies spun counterclockwise. Every moment of his life flashed before him in reverse. His final lesson, the rebuilding of the Jedi Order, the defeat of the First Order. Kylo Ren's fall, his nephew's corruption, his failure, the Academy burning, decades rewinding like a holovid playing backward at impossible speed. The sensation of wrongness overwhelmed everything else. This wasn't death, this wasn't transcendence, this was... His eyes snapped open, twin suns poured golden light through a small window, the angle immediately familiar despite being impossible. The heat pressed against his face, dry, oppressive, the kind that made moisture farmers check their vaporators twice before noon. The ceiling above him was low, whitewashed stone that reflected the desert glare. He knew this ceiling, had stared at it for the first 9 years of his life, dreaming of escape, of adventure, of anywhere but Tatooine. Luke lifted his hands, small hands, a child's hands, uncaloused, unmarked by lightsaber training or farm work or the weight of decades holding a galaxy together. He turned them over slowly, watching fingers that shouldn't exist, fingers from a body he'd left behind over 60 years ago. No, this isn't possible. The Force flooded through him like a dam breaking. Not the controlled, measured connection of an experienced master, but a tsunami of raw power crashing into a vessel far too small to contain it. His 9-year-old nervous system lit up with energy that had taken decades to cultivate, to refine, to master. Every cell screamed with the strain of holding power meant for a body 3 times this age. Luke's breath came in ragged gasps. He forced himself to focus, to center, to apply the meditation techniques he'd learned from Yoda, from ancient texts, from his own 6 decades of practice. Slowly, agonizingly, he compressed the Force presence down, building walls inside his own consciousness to keep from burning out this young mind. The room came into sharper focus. His room. The small bed he'd slept in as a child. The model starships he'd built from scavenged parts, hung on strings from the ceiling, turning slowly in the air current from the ventilation shaft. The chest containing his few possessions. The worn rug on the stone floor. And through the door, voices. Familiar voices that he'd last heard over 6 decades ago, voices that had haunted his dreams for years after their deaths. "Check the Southridge vaporators yet," Owen Lars was saying, his tone carrying that familiar gruff concern. "Probably need new filters again. Sand's been worse this season." "You say that every season," Beru replied, her voice warm with gentle humor. "Luke's still asleep. That boy could sleep through a sandstorm." Tears welled up before he could stop them, streaming down his small face. "They're alive. They're both alive." The weight of it crushed him, decades of guilt he'd carried like a stone. In the original timeline, he'd left Tatooine seeking adventure, seeking to be something more than a moisture farmer. He'd found that adventure. He'd become a Jedi. He'd helped destroy the Death Star and save the galaxy. But Owen and Beru had paid the price. Stormtroopers searching for the droids had burned them alive, left their charred bodies in the smoldering ruins of this very homestead. Luke had returned to find only ashes and bones, and the crushing realization that his family had died because of him, because he'd gotten involved, because he'd been special. He'd never properly mourned them. The galaxy had needed him too urgently. Rescue princesses, fight battles, destroy superweapons, save his father, rebuild the Jedi Order. There had never been time to grieve 2 simple moisture farmers on a backwater desert planet. But here, now, they were alive. Talking about vaporator filters and breakfast and the mundane details of life that Luke had forgotten could be so precious. He swung his legs out of bed. His feet didn't reach the floor properly. He'd forgotten how short he'd been at 9. Everything was slightly too large, slightly too far away. The mirror on the wall showed him a face he hadn't seen in decades, round with childhood, tanned from Tatooine's suns, eyes that should have been innocent but contained the weight of a lifetime he'd already lived. How is this possible? He reached out through the Force, searching for answers. The galaxy's timeline spread before him like a vast tapestry, and he could feel the wrongness, the deviation, the point where his consciousness had crashed into this moment like a meteor into sand. This was 10 BBY, 9 years after the Empire's rise, 9 years before the original timeline's events would begin. 9 years to change everything. Luke stood, his legs steadier than they should have been for a child who'd just woken. Muscle memory from 6 decades of Jedi training warred with a body that had never held a lightsaber, never run through combat drills. He took a breath and walked toward the door, each step deliberate. The corridor was exactly as he remembered, short, connecting his small bedroom to the sunken courtyard that formed the heart of the homestead. He could hear the vaporators humming their eternal song, feel the vibration through the stone floor. And then he stepped into the kitchen. Time stopped. Beru Lar stood at the stove, her back to him, stirring something in a pot that smelled of grains and blue milk. Her hair was dark, untouched by the gray that would come later, pulled back in a practical bun. She wore her work dress, the one with the patched sleeve she'd mended 3 times because she hated waste. Owen sat at the table, datapad in hand, reviewing moisture readout reports. His face was weathered but younger than Luke remembered, his shoulders still broad with the strength of a man in his prime. He looked up as Luke entered, and for a moment their eyes met. Luke's careful control shattered like glass. He ran across the kitchen, 3 long strides that should have been 6 for legs this short, and wrapped his small arms around both of them. Owen stiffened in surprise. Beru turned, startled, the spoon clattering against the pot's edge. "Luke?" Owen's voice carried confusion and concern. "What's gotten into you, boy?" Luke couldn't speak. The sobs came from somewhere too deep for words, shaking his small frame. He buried his face against Beru's apron, feeling her warmth, smelling the familiar scent of desert flowers she grew in the moisture-rich sections of the homestead, the cooking oil she used, the laundry soap she made herself. She was real. She was alive. She was here. Beru's arms came around him automatically, pulling him close. "Luke, sweetie, what's wrong? Did you have a nightmare?" He wanted to tell her yes, wanted to say he'd dreamed of stormtroopers in flames and their deaths and his failure, but the truth was so much more impossible than any nightmare. "I love you," he managed, his voice muffled against her dress. "I love you so much. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I didn't save you. I'm sorry, Luke." Beru knelt, taking his face in her hands, studying him with those kind eyes that had been the only mother love he'd ever known. "You're not making sense. Save us from what?" Her hands were warm and calloused from farm work, gentle despite their roughness. Luke looked into her face, the face he'd last seen frozen in death, and something shifted in the Force around them. She felt it. He could see the moment it registered, the strange warmth radiating from this child, the sense of something vast and ancient residing behind 9-year-old eyes. Her brow furrowed, but she didn't pull away. "There now," she said softly, pulling him close again. "Whatever scared you, it's over. You're safe. We're safe." Owen stood, moving closer. "Boy's not right. Heat getting to you, Luke? You feel fevered?" His uncle's hand settled on Luke's head, checking for temperature but also offering comfort in the only way Owen knew how. The gruff moisture farmer who'd raised him without complaint, who'd protected him from imperial attention, who'd loved him in his stern, practical way. Luke forced himself to straighten, to wipe his tears, to offer them a smile that carried more serenity and wisdom than any 9-year-old should possess. "I'm okay," he said, and his voice was steadier now. "I just had a dream. About the future, about losing you both. And I woke up and realized how much you mean to me." Beru and Owen exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication that came from years of partnership. "Well," Owen said gruffly, clearly uncomfortable with the display of emotion but trying, "we're not going anywhere. Farm's not going to run itself, and somebody's got to keep you from running off to join the academy every other month." Luke almost laughed. In the original timeline, he'd begged to attend the Imperial Academy, dreamed of being a pilot, anything to escape this planet. But that Luke hadn't known what he was escaping toward. A galaxy at war, his family's deaths, decades of struggle and loss. This Luke knew better. "I'm not going anywhere either," Luke said, and meant it with his whole heart. "Not until I've done what I came back to do." The words slipped out before he could catch them. Owen's eyes narrowed. "Came back? Luke, you're talking strange. Maybe we should—" "I'm fine, Uncle Owen. Really." Luke stepped back, composing himself, drawing on decades of Jedi discipline to school his features. "I promise. Just a weird dream. Can I help with breakfast?" Beru studied him a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "Set the table then, and drink some water. You look flushed." But as he worked, his mind was already racing ahead. The Force rippled around him, responding to his presence, his intent. He could feel it more clearly than he ever had in his first life, the living energy that connected all things, that flowed through him like a river. He had approximately 9 years before the droids would arrive, 9 years before the message from Leia, 9 years before the Empire would come searching, before Owen and Beru would die, before the original timeline's tragedies would unfold. 9 years to save them, to save everyone, to find his father before Vader consumed all that remained of Anakin Skywalker. But first, he needed to find Obi-Wan. After breakfast, which Luke ate mechanically while Owen discussed vaporator maintenance and Beru asked gentle questions he deflected with practiced ease, he volunteered for something he'd never done in the original timeline. "I can check the South Ridge vaporators," he offered. Owen's eyebrows rose. You hate that route. Nothing but rocks and heat. Clear my head after that dream." Owen and Beru exchanged another glance. Something in their expressions suggested they knew Luke was different today, changed in some fundamental way they couldn't articulate. But Tatooine farmers learned early not to question small mercies. "Fine," Owen said. "But take the speeder. It's too hot to walk that far. And be back before midday. Last thing I need is explaining to your aunt why you collapsed from heat stroke." Luke nodded, already moving toward the equipment shed. The speeder was there, exactly as he remembered, older than him, patched more times than anyone could count, but reliable. He started it with the ease of someone who'd been repairing machinery for 60 years, then guided it out of the courtyard. The twin suns beat down on him, but he barely felt the heat. A simple Force technique, regulating his body temperature, something he'd learned from ancient Jedi texts, kept him comfortable. He turned the speeder north, away from the South Ridge toward the Jundland Wastes, toward the hut where an old Jedi Master sat alone with his guilt and his grief, waiting for a destiny he believed would never come. Luke's hands tightened on the controls. His small figure cast a long shadow across the sand as he drove deeper into the desert, away from safety, toward the first step in changing everything. He'd failed Obi-Wan in the original timeline, let him sacrifice himself too early, hadn't learned enough from him, had spent years wishing he'd had more time with the man who'd given him everything. "Not this time. I'm coming, Ben," Luke whispered to the desert wind. "Hold on just a little longer. Everything's about to change." The speeder accelerated, kicking up plumes of sand that glittered in the double sunlight. Behind him, Valar's homestead grew smaller. Ahead, the rocky wastes beckoned. Dangerous, unforgiving, home to Tusken raiders and worse things. Luke drove toward them without hesitation, without fear, with only the absolute certainty of a man who'd already lived this life once and refused to make the same mistakes twice. The Force sang around him, recognizing its Grandmaster returned to a time before he'd earned the title, ready to reshape the galaxy before darkness could take hold. The twin suns blazed overhead, bearing witness to the beginning of everything. The speeder's engine whined against the rising heat as Luke navigated deeper into the Jundland Wastes. The terrain shifted beneath him, from packed sand to loose drifts to exposed bedrock that jutted from the desert floor like broken teeth. The twin suns climbed higher, turning the sky from morning gold to merciless white. Most 9-year-olds would be terrified out here. The Jundland Wastes were notorious, a maze of canyons and plateaus where Tusken raiders hunted and crate dragons claimed territory. Owen had forbidden Luke from venturing this far alone more times than he could count. But Luke wasn't most 9-year-olds. His small hands held the controls with perfect confidence, his eyes reading the terrain ahead through decades of experience. He guided the speeder around a cluster of boulders that would have concealed a sand people ambush, avoided a stretch of sand that his Force sense warned was unstable, took a narrow canyon pass that cut 15 minutes from the journey. The Force flowed through him like a second heartbeat, far stronger than it had any right to be in a body this young. He'd spent the entire ride from the homestead building internal barriers, constructing mental architecture to contain power that wanted to burn through him like lightning through a thin wire. Even compressed, controlled, carefully managed, his presence in the Force was immense. Any Force-sensitive within a dozen kilometers would feel it. That was the point. 20 minutes into the wastes, Luke felt them before he saw them. 6 presences radiating hostile intent, moving to intercept. He slowed the speeder, bringing it to a stop in a wide clearing between 2 rocky outcroppings. He dismounted with the careful movements of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. The Tusken Raiders emerged from cover with the practiced coordination of experienced hunters. 2 from behind boulders to his left, 3 from a narrow ravine to his right, 1 from the cliff edge above. They surrounded him in a loose circle, Gatoriffy sticks raised, their rapt faces revealing nothing but the dark slits of their eye coverings. In the original timeline, Luke had been terrified of sand people. Every child on Tatooine grew up on stories of their brutality, their territoriality, their willingness to kill outsiders without hesitation. This Luke had studied their culture, their language, their spiritual beliefs in the archives of the rebuilt Jedi Temple, had mediated disputes between Tusken tribes and moisture farmers, had come to understand that they were people, fierce, proud, and defending their homeland against colonizers who saw them as monsters. He turned slowly, making eye contact with each raider in turn, his small hands held away from his body in a gesture of peace. "I mean you no harm, sand people," he said in perfect Tusken, the clicking guttural language that few outsiders ever learned. "I walk in peace across your lands." The raiders froze. The one directly in front of him, the leader judging by the more elaborate wrappings and the quality of his weapon, tilted his head in what might have been surprise. They spoke among themselves in rapid clicks and hoots, debating. Luke caught fragments. "Child speaks the true tongue, alone easy prey, bad spirits." The leader made a decision. He raised his Gatoriffy stick and charged, the others following his lead. All 6 attacked simultaneously, their weapons swinging toward the small boy who should have been helpless. Luke didn't move his body, he simply raised one small hand. The Force erupted. All 6 Gatoriffy sticks ripped from their wielders' hands mid-swing, suspended in the air as if caught by invisible threads. The Tusken Raiders stumbled, momentum carrying them forward while their weapons hung motionless in a perfect circle around Luke. The child stood at the center, his hands still raised, his face serene. Then the weapons began to disassemble, wood separated from metal fittings, leather bindings unwound. Each Gatoriffy broke into its component parts, shaft, spike, blade, grip, all hanging suspended, slowly rotating. The Tuskens made sounds Luke had never heard from them before. Fear, pure and absolute. Several made the sign against evil spirits, backing away. The leader dropped to his knees, pressing his wrapped forehead to the sand. Luke lowered his hand. The disassembled weapons settled gently to the ground in neat piles, each piece carefully placed. "I do not wish to fight you," Luke said, still speaking their language. "Your ancestors are the rightful guardians of this desert. I honor that, I honor you. But I must pass through your lands today. Please forgive the intrusion." He bowed, a deep, respectful gesture that acknowledged their authority over this territory. The leader rose slowly, speaking in awed tones. "You are Jedi? The wizards from the old stories? Before the Empire?" "I am what I need to be," Luke replied. "And right now, I need to find an old friend, a hermit who lives deeper in the wastes. Do you know of him?" Finally, the leader pointed northwest toward a cluster of mesas barely visible through the heat shimmer. "The crazy one, the old human who speaks to spirits. He lives in the stone place, where the wind screams." A pause. "We do not go there. The spirits are angry in that place." Luke nodded. "Thank you. Go in peace. Tell your people that the winds are changing. The Empire's grip weakens. Soon, your lands may be yours again." He climbed back onto the speeder, aware of 6 sets of eyes following his every movement. As he drove away, he heard them hooting to each other, not in hostility now, but in wonder, in religious awe, in the beginning of a story that would spread through the Tusken tribes for generations. The wind-carved mesas grew larger as Luke approached. Obi-Wan had chosen his exile well, this deep in the wastes. Only the desperate or the foolish ventured. The rock formations created natural wind tunnels that howled constantly, a sound that would drive most beings mad over time. Luke wondered how much of Obi-Wan's deteriorating mental state came from simple isolation versus the environment's psychological assault. The sound of a speeder engine approaching from behind made Luke glance back, a sand-colored vehicle older than his own, closing fast. Through the Force, he felt a familiar presence, old, damaged, but with a core of light that still burned despite decades of guilt threatening to extinguish it. Obi-Wan Kenobi had felt Luke's presence in the Force and was coming to investigate. Luke brought his speeder to a stop at the base of the largest mesa. He dismounted and waited, his small frame very still, his presence in the Force deliberately allowed to radiate outward now. Obi-Wan's speeder crested a dune and slid to a halt 30 meters away. The old Jedi, though not as old as Luke remembered him from the original timeline, not yet, emerged with his lightsaber already in hand. His robes were tattered, sun-bleached to the color of bone. His beard was longer than it should be, unkempt. His eyes held the haunted look of a man who'd watched his entire world burn and blamed himself for lighting the match. He stared at Luke, and Luke felt the moment recognition hit. "Luke?" Obi-Wan's voice was rough from disuse, cracking slightly. "Luke Skywalker? What are you doing out here alone? This is Tusken territory. It's not safe." He stopped mid-sentence, finally processing what his Force senses were telling him. His weapon hand trembled, his face drained of color. What are you?" The question came out barely above a whisper, tinged with fear and wonder in equal measure. Luke turned to face him fully, and their eyes met. In that moment through the Force, Obi-Wan felt the impossible. This child's presence was vast, ancient, deep as an ocean and bright as a star. Power that shouldn't exist in any being, let alone a 9-year-old moisture farmer's nephew. "Hello, Master Kenobi," Luke said, his child's voice carrying an undertone of warmth, of familiarity, of grief long processed. "Or do you prefer Ben these days? I know you've been hiding from the name Obi-Wan for a long time." Obi-Wan took an involuntary step backward. "How do you... Your uncle doesn't speak of... I've never... Somewhere private, your hut perhaps? I know it's not far from here. About 3 kilometers northwest, carved into the cliff face overlooking the Valley of Winds." "Stop!" Obi-Wan's lightsaber ignited with its familiar snap hiss, blue blade humming in the desert air. "Stop talking. Tell me what dark side sorcery this is. Tell me who sent you. Tell me, Ben." The single word, spoken with such compassion, such familiarity, such love, stopped the old Jedi cold. "Please, I know you're afraid. I know you don't understand. But I'm not your enemy. I'm not possessed. I'm not corrupted. I'm just me. And I need your help." Obi-Wan's blade wavered. "You're 9 years old. Owen and Beru's nephew. I've watched you from afar since you were an infant, protecting you as I promised your father I would before." He cut himself off, the pain too fresh even after a decade. Before he became Darth Vader, Luke finished quietly, the lightsaber deactivated. Obi-Wan staggered as if struck. Don't speak that name, don't you dare. Get on your speeder," Luke said, his voice firmer now, carrying an edge of command that no child should possess. "We're going to your hut, we're going to talk, and I'm going to explain everything. But I can't do it here, standing in the sun. Please, Master, trust me for just a little while longer." The use of Master, a title Obi-Wan hadn't heard in a decade, spoken by someone who should never have known to use it, seemed to decide him. He climbed back onto his speeder in a daze, his movements mechanical. Luke followed on his own vehicle. They drove in silence through the twisting canyons, the wind screaming around them, until Obi-Wan's dwelling came into view. It was exactly as Luke remembered from the visions he'd seen in the original timeline, a modest structure carved into the cliff face, more cave than home. The entrance was shaded by an overhang, protected from the worst of the sun. Inside would be sparse, sleeping pallet, meditation space, a few basic necessities, and hidden in a chest beneath a loose stone, 2 lightsabers, one blue, one that should have been blue but had bled red. They parked the speeders and entered. The interior was cool, dim, silent except for the muffled howl of wind outside. Obi-Wan gestured for Luke to sit on the floor, then paced like a caged animal, unable to settle. "Speak," he commanded, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "Tell me what sorcery this is, what you are, how you know things you shouldn't know." Luke sat in perfect meditation posture, spine straight, hands resting gently on his knees, breathing controlled. The posture of a Jedi Master, not a child. "I'm going to tell you something that sounds impossible," Luke began. "I'm going to tell you about a future that hasn't happened yet. About events that will unfold if we don't change them. About a man named Luke Skywalker who became a Jedi, who fought against the Empire, who redeemed his father at the cost of nearly everything. This is madness. You're 9 years old. You can't possibly— I'm 69 years old, Luke interrupted, meeting his eyes. I died peacefully, surrounded by my students, having rebuilt the Jedi Order and brought peace to the galaxy, and then the Force sent me back. Or my father's sacrifice did. Or perhaps they're the same thing. I don't fully understand it myself. But I woke up this morning in my childhood body, with every memory, every lesson, every moment of those 60 years intact. He paused, letting that sink in. I know you don't believe me. How could you? It's impossible. But Ben, Luke's voice softened, I've missed you so much. In the original timeline, you died when I was 19. You let Vader strike you down on the Death Star to give us time to escape. I spent decades wishing I'd had more time with you, wishing I'd learned more, understood more, told you how much you meant to me before it was too late. Tears rolled down Luke's small face. I'm not making that mistake again. Obi-Wan stood frozen, his hand pressed against his chest as if warding off a physical blow. Stop. Please, stop. This isn't— You can't, because I'm going to show you. I'm going to share my memories through the Force. It's an ancient technique, very difficult, and it will hurt. I'm sorry for that, but you need to see the truth. I want you to leave. But something in the child's touch, the warmth, the familiarity, the absolute conviction, held him in place. Sit down, Master, Luke said, and there was Force command in the words now, gentle but irresistible. Obi-Wan found himself sitting on his meditation cushion without consciously choosing to do so. Luke knelt before him, both small hands reaching up to frame the old Jedi's weathered face. I learned this from the ancient texts in the Jedi archives, Luke said. From holocrons older than the Republic, a way for masters to share their knowledge directly with their students, a way to bypass words and show pure truth. Luke, wait. I'm sorry, Ben. This is going to hurt. But you need to see. You need to believe. Because we don't have much time, and I need you with me for what comes next. Luke's eyes began to glow with soft golden light. The Force surged between them, not violent, not aggressive, but overwhelming in its intensity. Obi-Wan gasped as the memories flooded in. The droids arriving on Tatooine, R2-D2's holographic message, a young woman in white robes. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. The decision to train Luke, the journey to Alderaan, the Death Star, the duel with Vader in the corridor, that terrible black mask and mechanical breathing. Obi-Wan's own voice. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. The blade falling. Luke's scream of denial. Years compressed into moments. Yoda's training in the Dagobah swamps. Cloud City, the revelation. No, I am your father. The horror, the denial, the fall through the clouds. The rescue, the throne room on the second Death Star. Luke in black facing the Emperor. The duel with Vader, father and son locked in combat, until Luke threw down his weapon. I am a Jedi, like my father before me. The Emperor's lightning, Vader's terrible choice, the mask lifted, revealing Anakin's scarred face. You were right about me. Tell your sister, you were right. Decades more. Luke training students, building the Jedi Order from ashes. His nephew's fall, Ben Solo becoming Kylo Ren, and the crushing guilt that echoed Obi-Wan's own. The fight to save the galaxy again, and finally peace. Old age, students surrounding his bed, the gentle transition into the Force, until the wrenching sensation of being pulled backward through time. The vision ended. Obi-Wan collapsed onto his side, sobbing uncontrollably. His hands shook, his entire body trembled with the weight of what he'd witnessed, a lifetime compressed into minutes, burning itself into his consciousness with the authenticity that only Force-shared memory could carry. Luke knelt beside him, his small hand gentle on Obi-Wan's shoulder. I know it's overwhelming. I'm sorry, Ben. I'm so sorry. Every moment, that was real. Yes. You really lived all that? I did. Obi-Wan pushed himself up to sitting, his face wet with tears, his eyes red. You saw me die. You watched me sacrifice myself, and you carried that for decades. I did, and it was one of my greatest regrets, that I didn't have more time with you, that I never got to really know you as a person, instead of just as my teacher. Luke's own tears continued to flow. In another timeline, another life, you gave me everything. You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me what a Jedi could be. You loved me when I was just a farm boy, who didn't know anything about the Force or the galaxy or my own heritage. He squeezed Obi-Wan's shoulder gently, and now I get a second chance. We both do, to do it right this time. Obi-Wan stared at the child who wasn't truly a child, whose eyes held the weight of decades, whose presence in the Force burned with the power of a fully realized Jedi Master. "Why?" he whispered. "Why are you here? What does the Force want from us?" Luke's smile was sad and determined in equal measure. "It wants us to save him, to save Anakin before the galaxy burns, to prevent the Empire's full rise, to stop the Death Star before it's built, to rescue everyone we lost before they die." Anakin. Obi-Wan's voice broke on the name. "You expect me to believe he can be saved? That monster killed thousands. Serves the Emperor absolutely. He is Vader now. Anakin is dead." "No," Luke said firmly. "He's in pain. Constant, unending pain. Physical and emotional. The Emperor tortures him with every breath. His suit is designed to hurt him, to keep him angry, to fuel the dark side through suffering. But he's still in there, Ben. Still fighting. Still capable of redemption." Luke stood, his small frame somehow commanding despite its size. "My father was a slave as a boy. He broke free of those chains. But now he's a slave again, to Palpatine, to the dark side, to his own pain and guilt. And I'm going to free him. We're going to free him. Together." Obi-Wan looked up at him, this impossible child who wasn't a child, and felt something he hadn't experienced in a decade. "Hope. This is madness," he said quietly. "Absolute madness." He climbed to his feet, brushing tears from his face, straightening his spine for the first time in years. "When do we leave?" Luke's smile was radiant, transforming his young face. "Tomorrow. We need a ship first. What do you propose? We can't exactly walk into a spaceport and buy passage to. Where would we even go? How would we find him?" Luke's smile turned mischievous, an expression that was pure Anakin Skywalker, and Obi-Wan's breath caught at the resemblance. "Have you ever robbed a hut?" Luke asked. Despite everything, the impossible situation, the overwhelming revelations, the sheer insanity of what they were about to attempt, Obi-Wan found himself laughing for the first time in years. The twin suns climbed toward midday, their light pouring through the narrow window of Obi-Wan's hut in a shaft of gold that illuminated dancing dust motes. Luke sat cross-legged on the floor, his small form perfectly still in meditation posture, while Obi-Wan paced the confined space like a caged Nexu. "I need to understand," Obi-Wan said, his voice still hoarse from crying. "If you've lived all that, if you've seen what comes, why return to now? Why not go back further, stop Anakin's fall before it happens, prevent Order 66, save the Jedi?" Luke opened his eyes. "I didn't choose when to return, the Force chose. Or perhaps my father's sacrifice created this possibility. I don't know. But this is where I woke up. 10 years into the Empire's reign, with Vader already established, the Jedi scattered or dead, the galaxy under Palpatine's control." He paused. "Maybe this is the point where change is still possible, where the pieces are all in motion, but nothing is inevitable yet. Or maybe it's the point where we fail," Obi-Wan countered. "Anakin has been Vader for a decade, 10 years of serving the dark side, 10 years of atrocities. How can you possibly believe he'll turn back?" "Because he turned back for me once before." Luke's voice carried absolute conviction. "In the throne room, when the Emperor was killing me with lightning, when I was dying and begging him to help, he chose me, chose love over power, chose redemption over the dark side. If he could do it then, at the very end, he can do it now." Obi-Wan stopped pacing, his back to Luke. "What you showed me, that throne room, you said father. You called him father while he was Vader." "I did. How could you look at that monster and see anything worth saving?" Luke stood, moving to stand beside Obi-Wan at the window. Even at 9, even with his small stature, his presence filled the space with quiet authority. "Because I looked past the armor, past the mask, past the title and the reputation and the fear." Luke's gaze was distant, remembering. "I looked into his eyes, his real eyes, when I finally saw them, and I saw pain, regret. A man who'd made terrible choices and was trapped in the consequences. A man who wanted to die but didn't know how." He turned to face Obi-Wan. "And I saw my father, the man my mother loved, the man you called brother, the slave boy who wanted to free everyone. He was still there, Ben, buried under years of suffering and darkness, but still there. Padme." Obi-Wan's voice cracked on the name. "You know about Padme." I know he loved her so completely that the fear of losing her destroyed him. Luke's small hand found Obi-Wan's arm. The Emperor used that love as a weapon, showed him visions of her dying in childbirth, offered him the dark side as the only way to save her, and when she died anyway, he blamed himself, blamed me, blamed everyone except the one truly responsible. Obi-Wan's shoulders sagged. I knew about their marriage, suspected it for years. I should have, if I'd just talked to him, told him the Council's rules were guidelines, not absolutes, maybe he would have trusted me with his fears instead of turning to Palpatine. You did the best you could with what you knew, Luke said gently. The Jedi Order's prohibition against attachment, it was meant to prevent possessive love, the kind that leads to fear and suffering. But the Order forgot that healthy love, the kind that's freely given and freely received, is the opposite of the dark side. It's the light itself. He squeezed Obi-Wan's arm. You weren't wrong to care about him then. You weren't weak for loving your brother. That love is what's going to save him now. Obi-Wan turned, studying Luke's young face with an intensity that would have made most children squirm. In your memories, what you showed me, I saw fragments, the Death Star, the Emperor. But there's more you haven't told me, about Anakin, about what he did for those 10 years before you faced him. Do you really want to know? I need to know, if we're going to attempt this impossible rescue, I need to understand what he's become. Luke nodded slowly. He moved back to the center of the room, sinking into meditation posture again. Sit, I'll share more. But Ben, this will hurt worse than what you've already seen. Obi-Wan sat across from him, steeling himself. Show me. Luke reached out, his small hands finding Obi-Wan's. The Force flowed between them again, and the visions came. Vader hunting Jedi. The Temple Inquisitorius, where captured Force sensitives were tortured, corrupted, or killed. The screams of the broken, the cold efficiency with which Vader executed the Emperor's orders. Planet after planet subjugated, rebel cells crushed, entire populations enslaved. And through it all, the pain. The constant, unending physical agony of the suit, the way it chafed against burned flesh, the way the respirator hurt with every breath, the way the cybernetic limbs sent feedback shocks through damaged nerves. The suit was a torture device designed to keep Vader angry, to fuel his dark side power through suffering. But worse than the physical pain was the emotional void. The knowledge that Padmé was dead, that his children, he'd had children, had died with her, that everything he'd sacrificed for, everything he'd fallen for, had been for nothing. The Emperor's voice, constant and mocking, "You were supposed to be the chosen one, Lord Vader. Instead, you were simply my tool." The hatred Vader felt, not just for the Emperor, not just for Obi-Wan, but for himself. The self-loathing so intense it became another fuel for the dark side. The death wish that never quite manifested, because the Emperor always found new missions, new targets, new reasons for Vader to keep existing. And underneath it all, buried so deep, Vader himself barely recognized it. A spark. A tiny fragment of Anakin Skywalker that refused to die, that remembered blue skies on Naboo, that remembered a laugh that sounded like music, that remembered what it felt like to be loved for something other than his power. The vision ended. Obi-Wan was weeping again, great racking sobs that shook his entire frame. "He's in hell," Obi-Wan gasped. "Palpatine put him in hell and left him there to burn." "Yes." Luke's voice was thick with his own tears. "The Emperor is a monster. He broke my father piece by piece, and then used the broken pieces as weapons. And he did it deliberately, methodically, as punishment for Anakin's failures on Mustafar. How can anyone come back from that? 10 years of torture, physical and mental. How can he be anything but broken?" "Because he's stronger than Palpatine knows," Luke said fiercely. "The Emperor thinks he controls Vader completely. But there's a reason Palpatine keeps him in pain, keeps him angry. It's because if Vader ever found peace, even for a moment, the spell would break. The dark side would lose its hold." He leaned forward, urgency in his voice. "That's what happened in the throne room. When Vader saw me dying, when he heard me call him father, when he remembered what love felt like, the pain and anger weren't enough anymore. The dark side lost. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to remind him of love before he's too broken to remember what it is." Obi-Wan wiped his face with his sleeve. "Even if we reach him, even if we somehow break through, Palpatine will sense it. The Emperor's connection to Vader is absolute. He'll know the moment Vader wavers. Then we'll be ready for him." Luke's young face was set with determination. Without Vader, Palpatine is just a withered old man with force lightning and parlor tricks. Powerful, yes, but not invincible, not when we have truth on our side. What truth? That he lied. About everything. Luke stood, beginning to pace now, energy flowing through his small frame. Palpatine told Vader that he killed Padme in his anger. Let him believe for 10 years that he was responsible for her death. But that's not what happened. Obi-Wan went very still. What are you saying? The Emperor drained her life force through the Force while she was giving birth. Used her energy to keep Vader alive on the operating table. She didn't die from a broken heart or from Anakin's force choke. She was murdered. Deliberately. By Palpatine. Luke's small hands clenched into fists. And he let Vader believe it was his fault. Let that guilt fester for a decade, using it to keep him enslaved. I felt it in the Force when I became a master. Studied the dark side techniques Palpatine used. The life drain requires a strong connection between victim and vessel, and Anakin's bond with Padme was profound enough to channel through. Luke turned to face Obi-Wan. Palpatine killed her to save Vader, then convinced Vader he'd done it himself. The perfect prison, built from guilt and grief. Obi-Wan stood abruptly, crossing to the far wall, his fists slamming against stone. That monster, that absolute monster. She was pregnant. She was giving birth to... He stopped, turned slowly. Children. You said children, plural. Luke nodded. Twins. A boy and a girl. Luke and Leia. You're named after yourself? I was named after my grandmother on my mother's side, actually. Leia was named after hers. But yes, it's complicated. Luke smiled slightly. Padme didn't die until after we were born. The medical droids kept her alive long enough for that. Then Palpatine's life drain killed her. Where are they now, these children, if Vader doesn't know they exist? They were separated, hidden from the Emperor and from Vader. Luke's voice softened. Owen and Beru took the boy to Tatooine. Senator Bail Organa took the girl to Alderaan. They grew up apart, safe, not knowing about each other or their father until they were adults. Obi-Wan's eyes widened. You, Owen and Beru took you. They did. And you've been living with them for 9 years, right under my nose. And I never... Obi-Wan's face twisted. Of course. I was watching you, protecting you from a distance, just as I promised Anakin I would before. He couldn't finish. Before Mustafar, Luke supplied gently. Before the duel, before you left him burning on that volcanic shore. He was trying to kill me. He'd already murdered the Jedi, slaughtered children in the temple. I had to... I know, Luke interrupted. I know you did what you thought was right. And I'm not judging you, Ben. I've made my own terrible choices. Led students to their deaths. Failed my own nephew so badly he fell to the dark side and destroyed everything I'd built. He moved closer. We've both failed. We both carry guilt. But that's why we're here now. That's why we get this chance. To do better. To save the people we love before it's too late. Obi-Wan sank back to the floor, exhausted. This is madness, going to Mustafar, assuming we can even get there, confronting Vader in his own fortress. It's suicide. We can't wait for him to come to us. By the time the original timeline's events unfold, too many people will already be dead. We have to act now, while we still can. You keep saying we. Why do you need me? You're clearly powerful enough to, because he loved you, still loves you buried under all that hatred and pain. Because hearing your voice, seeing your face, might be what breaks through when my words can't. He knelt before Obi-Wan, and because I can't do this alone, I need my master, even if I'm technically older than you now. Obi-Wan studied the child who contained multitudes, whose eyes held wisdom earned through decades of struggle. What's your plan? Assuming we survive the Hutt's displeasure and actually obtain a ship, we go to Mustafar. We infiltrate the fortress, and we confront Vader with the truth about Padme. Luke's voice was calm, matter-of-fact, the shock of learning he has children, that Palpatine lied to him, that his wife was murdered. It will crack his defenses. Give us an opening? And if it doesn't, if he simply kills us, then at least we died trying to save someone we love instead of hiding from our failures. Luke's smile was sad, but it will work, Ben. I know it will, because I've already done it once. I've already turned him back from the darkness. I just need to do it sooner this time. Before the galaxy pays the price for our hesitation. Obi-Wan was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached under his sleeping pallet, pulling out a metal case. He opened it, revealing 2 lightsabers, one with a familiar blue activation stud, the other with a grip Obi-Wan hadn't touched in 10 years. "I kept it," he said quietly. "Anakin's lightsaber. I couldn't destroy it, couldn't let it go." He lifted the weapon, its weight familiar in his hand. "I kept thinking, someday maybe I could give it back to him." "Stupid hope. Not stupid," Luke said. Prophetic, he reached out his small hand hovering over the lightsaber. "In the original timeline, you gave that to me, told me it had belonged to my father. It was the first step in my journey to becoming a Jedi. And now, we return it to the man it was made for. Remind him who he was before the darkness took him." The weapon felt right in Luke's grip despite his small hands. The Force resonated through it, recognizing him, welcoming him home. "I'll need to build my own eventually," Luke said. "But for now, this will do. A Jedi's weapon deserves to be wielded in defense of its creator." Obi-Wan clipped his own lightsaber to his belt, the familiar weight settling against his hip. "When do we leave for Mos Eisley?" "After the sun set. Less attention that way." Luke stood, moving to the window. "I need to get back to the homestead first. Tell Owen and Beru something that won't make them lock me in my room." "What will you tell them?" "That I'm with you." That last part won't reassure Owen. He thinks I'm a crazy hermit. "He's not entirely wrong," Luke said with affection. "But he also knows you protected me for 9 years without asking for anything in return. He'll trust you with my safety, even if he doesn't understand why." Obi-Wan walked Luke to his speeder. The twin suns now passed their zenith, beginning the slow descent toward evening. The heat was still oppressive, but both Force users barely noticed, their body's temperature regulated through subtle applications of their power. "Luke," Obi-Wan said as the boy climbed onto his speeder, "thank you." "For what?" "For making me believe that the galaxy isn't irredeemably broken. For reminding me that I was a Jedi once, before I became a coward hiding in the desert." "You were never a coward," Luke said firmly. "You were a guardian, watching over me, waiting for the moment when you'd be needed. That moment is now." He started the engine. "I'll see you tonight, Ben. Be ready." "I will. And Luke, be careful. The Force may have brought you back, but you're still in a child's body. You're not invincible." Luke's grin was pure mischief. "I know, but I'm close enough." The speeder kicked up sand as it accelerated, carrying the small figure back toward the Lars homestead. Obi-Wan watched until he disappeared into the heat shimmer, then turned back to his hut. For the first time in a decade, he had purpose. For the first time since Mustafar, he had hope. And somewhere in the galaxy, on a fortress world of ash and lava, Darth Vader meditated on his pain, unaware that his son was coming to save him, accompanied by the brother he thought he'd lost forever. The Force rippled with possibility, with the weight of destinies shifting, with the first stirrings of change that would reshape the galaxy. The game had begun. The twin suns painted the desert in shades of amber and gold as Luke guided his speeder back toward the Lars homestead. His small hands held the controls with practiced ease, but his mind was already racing ahead, planning, calculating, anticipating the conversation he was about to have. Owen and Beru deserved the truth. Not all of it. They'd never believe the full story, but enough to understand why he had to leave, enough to let him go without too much fight. The homestead came into view, its sunken courtyard a dark depression in the orange sand. Smoke rose from the kitchen vent, Beru preparing the evening meal. The vaporators hummed their eternal song, drawing moisture from air that seemed too dry to hold any. Luke parked the speeder in the equipment shed and walked toward the main entrance, his small shadow stretching long behind him. Through the Force, he felt Owen and Beru inside, worried, confused by his strange behavior this morning, but not angry, not yet. He descended the steps into the courtyard, the temperature dropping noticeably as he moved below ground level. The smell of cooking reached him, grain porridge, dried hubba, the tang of blue milk, familiar, comforting, achingly precious. Beru looked up as he entered the kitchen. "Luke, you've been gone all day. I was starting to worry. Did you check the South Ridge vaporators?" "I went to see Ben Kenobi instead." The wooden spoon clattered against the pot. Owen, who'd been reviewing moisture reports at the table, went very still. "You what?" Owen's voice was dangerously quiet. "I needed to talk to him about my father." Luke pulled out a chair and sat, meeting his uncle's eyes directly. "About Anakin Skywalker. We don't talk about him. I told you that. He's dead and gone and nothing good comes from. He's alive, and he's in terrible pain. And I'm going to help him." The silence that followed was absolute. Beru slowly wiped her hands on her apron, her face pale. Owen's fists clenched at his sides, his weathered face flushing red. Boy, I don't know what that crazy hermit told you, but Ben didn't tell me anything I didn't already know. Luke's voice remained level, infused with calm certainty. Uncle Owen, Aunt Beru, I need you to listen, really listen, because what I'm about to say sounds impossible, but it's true. Luke, Beru started. Please. Luke raised his hand, and the force rippled outward, gentle, warm, carrying absolute conviction. Both adults felt it, their mounting anger draining away, replaced by a strange calm. Sit down, both of you. They sat, not because they wanted to, but because something in the child's presence made resistance feel wrong, like arguing with the rising sun. I'm not a normal 9-year-old, Luke began. You've known that since this morning, haven't you? The way I've been acting, the things I've said, the way I feel different. Not bad strange, just old strange, like you're carrying something heavy we can't see. I am. Luke folded his small hands on the table. I can't explain all of it. You wouldn't believe me if I tried. But I can tell you this. I have knowledge I shouldn't have. Knowledge about the Force, about the galaxy, about what's coming. And I know that my father, Anakin Skywalker, is alive. He's become something terrible, something dark, but he's still alive, and he's suffering. Owen's jaw worked. Your father died before you were born, died a hero, fighting in the Clone Wars. That's all you need to know. That's the lie you told yourself to protect me. But I know the truth, Uncle Owen. I know he fell to the dark side. I know he serves the Emperor now as Darth Vader. I know what he's done, the atrocities he's committed, and I know he can still be saved. The name Vader hit them like a physical blow. Beru's hand flew to her mouth. Owen's face went from red to white. Who told you that name? Owen couldn't form complete sentences. It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is this. I'm leaving tomorrow with Ben Kenobi. We're going to find my father, and we're going to bring him back from the darkness. Luke's young face was set with determination that brooked no argument. I'm telling you this because I love you, because you deserve to know, not because I'm asking permission. Owen found his voice, though it shook. You're 9 years old. You can't go anywhere, let alone chase after him. Do you have any idea what Vader is? What he's done? He'd kill you without hesitation. He won't. Luke's certainty was absolute. Because I'm his son. And because underneath all that armor, all that pain, all that darkness, he's still Anakin Skywalker. Still the little boy who wanted to free all the slaves. Still the man who loved my mother so much he broke when he thought he'd lost her. Beru was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Your mother? You know about Padme, and I know that if I don't reach him now, thousands, millions will die because he stays in darkness. Luke stood, moving to kneel beside Beru's chair. Aunt Beru, you've been the only mother I've ever known. You've loved me, protected me, given me everything. I will never forget that. Never stop being grateful for it. He took her hands in his small ones. But I have to do this. Not because I want to leave you, but because the Force is giving me a chance to save someone I love. Someone you loved too, once before he fell. Little Annie, always trying to fix things, always so bright and afraid at the same time. She looked at Luke, really looked at him, and saw something that made her breath catch. You have his eyes. When you look at me like that, with that determination, it's like seeing him again. Owen's chair scraped as he stood, pacing to the far wall. This is insane. You're asking us to let you walk into certain death, to trust a hermit who's been half mad for a decade, to believe you can save someone who's beyond saving. I'm not asking, Luke said, standing to face his uncle. I'm telling you what I'm going to do, but I'd rather do it with your blessing than without it. He moved closer, looking up at Owen's weathered face. You're afraid. Afraid I'm like him, afraid the darkness will take me too, afraid of losing another Skywalker to the Force and its mysteries. Owen's jaw clenched. Can you blame me? I watched what it did to him. The nightmares, the anger, the feeling that he was meant for something greater than this dustball planet. It consumed him, Luke. It turned him into a monster. No, Luke said firmly. The Force didn't turn him into a monster. Fear did. The Emperor did. The absence of people who loved him enough to pull him back from the edge. He placed his small hand on Owen's arm. But I'm not alone in this. I have you. I have Aunt Beru. I have Ben. And I have something Anakin never had. I know how this story ends if we don't change it. I know the price of failure." Owen looked down at the boy, this strange old child who spoke with wisdom beyond his years. "What if you fail? What if you die trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved? Then at least I died trying to do the right thing, trying to save family." Luke's voice softened. "Uncle Owen, you taught me that family matters most, that you protect the people you love no matter what. I'm just applying that lesson to a bigger scale." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of vaporators and Beru's quiet crying. Finally, Owen's shoulders sagged. He looked older suddenly, worn down by a decade of fear and responsibility. "You're going no matter what I say, aren't you?" "Yes. And Kenobi will keep you safe as anyone can in what we're attempting." Owen crossed to where Luke stood and knelt, bringing himself to eye level. "Your father, Anakin, he was my stepbrother. I didn't understand him, didn't know how to help him. Maybe if I'd tried harder, been less judgmental about his Force abilities, he wouldn't have—" He stopped, emotion choking his words. "It wasn't your fault," Luke said. "Nothing you could have done would have changed his path. The Emperor had been grooming him for years, exploiting every weakness, every fear. You couldn't have stopped it, because I've already done it once." Luke's smile was sad and certain. "I just need to do it better this time. Sooner. Before the cost becomes too high. When do you leave?" "Tonight. After full dark. We're going to Mos Eisley first, to get a ship." "From Jabba the Hutt," Owen guessed, his tone dry. "Of course. Why steal from anyone sensible when you can rob a crime lord?" Luke's grin was pure mischief. "Ben's idea, actually. That old lunatic would come up with something like that." But there was fondness beneath Owen's gruff tone, grudging respect for the hermit who'd watched over them all from a distance. Beru pulled away, studying Luke's face. "Will you come back to us?" "I promise I'll try, but Aunt Beru—" Luke's expression grew serious. "If I don't, if something goes wrong, know that I love you, that you gave me the best childhood anyone could ask for, that when I was out there in the desert with the twin suns on my face and the sand in my boots, I was happy, truly happy. You should be playing with friends and complaining about chores and dreaming about the academy, not facing monsters and saving the galaxy." Luke hugged her back with all the strength in his small frame. "I know, but sometimes the Force asks things of us we're not ready for. Sometimes we have to grow up faster than we should." He pulled back, reaching up to wipe tears from her face. "But I promise you this, I won't let the darkness take me. I won't become like him, like what he is now. I have you and Uncle Owen anchoring me to the light. I have Ben to guide me, and I have something my father never had. I know what love looks like without fear poisoning it." Owen stood, his decision made. "I'll help you pack. You'll need water, rations, thermal gear for the cold nights, and credits. Beru, get the emergency fund from the storage vault. If he's going to do this fool thing, he's going to do it properly equipped." Owen's voice was gruff, but his eyes were wet. "Won't have anyone saying Owen Lars sent his nephew off to die unprepared." They spent the next hour in quiet preparation. Beru packed food that would keep, filled water containers, added extra moisture wicks. Owen gathered tools, emergency medical supplies, a portable comm unit with encrypted channels. Neither spoke much, but their love was evident in every careful selection. As the twin suns finally touched the horizon, Luke stood in the courtyard with a small pack slung over his shoulder. The homestead was bathed in orange and red light, shadows lengthening across the sand. Owen gripped his shoulder. "If you see him, if you somehow reach Anakin underneath all that Vader armor, tell him something for me. Sorry I didn't understand. Sorry I was afraid of what he was instead of proud of who he was trying to be." Owen's voice cracked. "Tell him his mother would have wanted him to come home." Luke nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Beru knelt, taking his face in her hands one more time. "Come back to us, Luke Skywalker. Come back with your father if you can. But come back even if you can't. Promise me, I promise to try my hardest. That's all anyone can do." She kissed his forehead. "May the Force be with you, whatever that means." Luke smiled through his tears. "It means I'm not alone. It means I'm connected to everyone I love, no matter how far apart we are. It means you'll always be with me, even when we're separated." He shouldered his pack and walked toward the equipment shed where the speeder waited. At the top of the courtyard steps, he turned back. Owen and Beru stood together in the dying light, arms around each other, watching him go. They looked older than they had this morning, worn by worry and love in equal measure. "I love you both," Luke called out. "Thank you for everything. We love you too, son," Owen called back, and it was the first time he'd ever called Luke that. "Now get going before I change my mind and lock you in the storage room." Luke laughed, the sound bright against the desert evening. Then he climbed onto the speeder, started the engine, and drove out into the gathering darkness. The homestead grew smaller behind him, two figures silhouetted against the dying light. Luke committed the image to memory. Owen and Beru Lars, the moisture farmers who'd loved him without question, who'd raised him as their own, who'd given him a home when the galaxy had taken everything else. In the original timeline, he'd never properly said goodbye, had left in a rush after finding their burned bodies, carrying guilt for decades about all the words left unspoken. Not this time. This time he'd told them he loved them, had thanked them properly, had given them the truth they deserved, even if they didn't fully understand it. And when he came back, when, not if, he'd bring them the family they'd lost. Bring Anakin home to the people who'd known him as a boy, before the darkness had claimed him. Luke turned his face toward Mos Eisley, toward Obi-Wan waiting in the Jundland wastes, toward the impossible task ahead. The Force hummed around him, singing with possibility, with hope, with the weight of destinies realigning. He pressed the accelerator, and the speeder leaped forward into the night. Behind him, the twin suns finally disappeared below the horizon. Ahead, stars began to emerge in the deepening dark, a galaxy full of pain and possibility, waiting to be saved. The night air over Tatooine's desert was cold enough to make breath visible, a stark contrast to the day's scorching heat. Luke guided his speeder through the darkness with the confidence of someone who'd navigated far worse terrain in his first lifetime. The stars overhead were brilliant, unobscured by atmosphere or light pollution, a river of diamonds across black velvet. Obi-Wan's hut appeared as a darker shadow against the cliff face. A single glow lamp burned in the window, the old Jedi waiting, as promised. Luke brought the speeder to a halt and dismounted. Before he could reach the entrance, Obi-Wan emerged, wearing clean robes for the first time in years, his hair and beard trimmed, his lightsaber prominent at his belt. He looked less like a broken hermit and more like the Jedi general he'd once been. "You came back," Obi-Wan said, as if he'd half expected Luke to change his mind. "I gave my word." Luke gestured to his pack. "Owen and Beru helped me prepare. They know where I'm going, what I'm attempting. And they didn't lock you in your room. They wanted to." Luke's smile was sad. "But they understand. Better than I expected, actually. Owen asked me to give my father a message if I reach him. Owen Lars has a message for Darth Vader. There's a difference." Luke adjusted his pack. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be to rob Jabba the Hutt and then fly to a fortress world to confront a Sith Lord." Obi-Wan's tone was dry, but underneath it ran a current of genuine resolve. "I've prepared what few supplies I have, though I suspect your list from Owen is more comprehensive. Moisture farmers learn to prepare for disaster. It's how we survive." Luke moved toward Obi-Wan's battered speeder. "We should leave the speeders here. We'll be coming back for them after we've either succeeded impossibly or died trying." "I thought you Jedi were supposed to trust in the Force." Obi-Wan's laugh was rough but genuine. "The Force brought me a 9-year-old Grandmaster. My trust has limits." They secured the speeders inside Obi-Wan's dwelling, then set off on foot toward Mos Eisley. The spaceport was only 8 kilometers from the Jundland wastes, close enough that its glow stained the horizon even from here, a smear of artificial light against the stars. They walked in comfortable silence for the first hour, Luke's short legs forcing Obi-Wan to moderate his pace. The desert at night was alive with sounds, the skitter of womp rats, the distant howl of a canyon crate dragon, the whisper of sand shifted by the eternal wind. "Tell me about Mustafar," Luke said finally. "About the duel. I saw fragments in your memories, but I need to understand what you saw, what you felt." Obi-Wan was quiet for so long Luke thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "It was the worst day of my life. Watching Anakin, watching my brother, so consumed by darkness he couldn't even recognize what he'd become." "What did he say to you? That I was his enemy? That I'd turned against him? That from his point of view the Jedi were evil?" Obi-Wan's voice was hollow with remembered pain. "He meant it, Luke. Every word. The dark side had poisoned him so thoroughly he genuinely believed the Order had betrayed him, that Palpatine was the victim, that everything he'd done was justified. And you fought him anyway." "I had to. He just tried to kill Padme, would have killed me if I hadn't defended myself." Obi-Wan's hands clenched. "But even then, even fighting for my life, I kept hoping he'd stop. that the real Anakin would break through and realize what he was doing. He didn't. No. He fought with absolute conviction that I was the traitor, that he was serving a greater good. The dark side is insidious that way. It convinces you that your worst actions are noble sacrifices. Obi-Wan stopped walking, his gaze distant. When I cut off his limbs, when I left him burning on that shore, I told him he was my brother and that I loved him. Do you know what he said back? He said he hated me. With his flesh burning, his lungs failing, his life bleeding out onto volcanic rock, he used his last strength to scream that he hated me. Obi-Wan's voice broke. And I left him there, walked away and let him burn because I couldn't finish it, couldn't kill him, and because of my weakness, Vader was born. It wasn't weakness, Luke said firmly. It was love. And it wasn't your failure that created Vader. It was Palpatine's manipulation. The Emperor found him, put him in that suit, and spent the next decade torturing him into the perfect weapon. I could have ended it. One stroke and Anakin Skywalker would have died a fallen Jedi instead of living as a Sith Lord. And you'd have destroyed any chance of redemption. Luke moved to stand directly in front of Obi-Wan, his small frame radiating certainty. Ben, listen to me. In the original timeline, your choice to spare him, to leave him alive, that's what made his redemption possible. If you'd killed him on Mustafar, he never would have had the chance to save me from the Emperor, never would have chosen love over darkness. Your mercy, your inability to kill your brother even when he deserved it, that's what saved the galaxy in the end. Obi-Wan stared at the child, tears glistening in his eyes. You really believe that? I know it. I felt it when he threw Palpatine down that reactor shaft. Felt his love, his grief, his desperate need to do one good thing before he died. That capacity for love survived because you couldn't bring yourself to extinguish it completely. They resumed walking, Mos Eisley growing larger on the horizon. The spaceport never truly slept, ships arriving and departing at all hours, smugglers and traders and bounty hunters conducting business best hidden from Imperial eyes. What's our approach? Obi-Wan asked as the outskirts came into view. We can't simply walk into Jabba's palace and ask nicely for a ship. Too many guards, too much security. Luke's expression turned calculating. Jabba keeps a private hangar in the South Quarter. Unmarked ships for special cargo. Less security because it's supposed to be secret. How do you know this? Because in the original timeline, I came here to rescue Han Solo from Jabba. Infiltrated the palace, saw the whole operation. Luke's smile was grim. Jabba likes to appear invincible, but his arrogance makes him predictable. He never imagines anyone would dare steal from him directly. They entered Mos Eisley through a back entrance, avoiding the main gates where stormtroopers checked IDs and asked questions. The spaceport was exactly as Luke remembered, a warren of cantinas, repair shops, flop houses, and shadowy deals conducted in darker corners. The streets stank of engine coolant, cooking spices, unwashed bodies, and the particular musk of too many alien species crammed into close quarters. Music blared from open doorways. Fights spilled into alleys. A Rodian and a Wookiee argued in their respective languages while a translator droid mediated poorly. Luke moved through it all with perfect confidence, his small form darting between crowds, his presence in the Force carefully muted to avoid drawing attention. Obi-Wan followed, his hand never far from his lightsaber, his Jedi senses alert for threats. They reached the South Quarter, less trafficked, more industrial. Large warehouse structures dominated the landscape, their doors sealed, their windows dark. Luke stopped before one that looked identical to its neighbors, except for a small symbol etched near the entrance, Jabba's mark. Here, Luke said. 6 ships inside, last I checked. We need the Corellian courier vessel, third from the left, fast, reliable, with a Class 1 hyperdrive. 2 humans, a Gamorrean, and a Weequay, all armed but not expecting trouble. Luke closed his eyes, reaching out through the Force. They're playing sabacc in the office. Bored, overconfident. Obi-Wan studied the entrance. Locked and coded. I could slice it, but it would take time. Or we could do this. Luke raised his hand toward the locking mechanism. The Force flowed outward, invisible fingers manipulating internal circuitry with surgical precision. Tumblers clicked. The electronic lock disengaged with a soft beep. The door slid open. Show off, Obi-Wan muttered, but there was pride in his voice. They slipped inside. The hangar was vast and dim, lit only by emergency lighting along the walls. 6 ships sat in neat rows, each one valuable enough to fund a small army. The Corellian courier was exactly where Luke remembered, sleek, well-maintained, with recent modifications to its sublight engines. "There," Luke whispered, pointing. "We need to reach it before." "Hey!" a shout from behind them. "Who's there?" The 4 guards emerged from the office, weapons drawn. The Gamorrean grunted and raised a vibro-axe. The Weequay's face twisted with recognition. "It's a kid and an old man. What are you doing in here? This is private property," his small figure seemingly unthreatening. "We need to borrow a ship, just for a short while. We'll bring it back, I promise." The guards laughed. One human, scarred and missing teeth, leveled his blaster. "Wrong answer, kid. You're going to meet the boss, and he's going to feed you to his rancor for—" Luke raised both hands. The force erupted. All 4 blasters ripped from their owner's hands simultaneously, floating in the air before disassembling in perfect synchronization. Barrels separated from power cells. Triggers fell away from grips. Each component hung suspended, slowly rotating, creating an impossible mechanical sculpture. The guards froze, staring in horror. The Gamorrean charged, his vibro-axe swinging. Luke flicked his wrist. The axe flew from the guard's hands, its blade embedding in the wall 15 meters away. Another gesture, and the Gamorrean lifted off his feet, suspended in midair, flailing helplessly. "I don't want to hurt you," Luke said, his voice carrying preternatural calm, "but I will defend myself if necessary. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit down very quietly and wait here until we leave. Then you'll tell Jabba that Jedi came and took his ship. Not thieves. Not smugglers, Jedi." He lowered his hands. The disassembled blasters settled gently on the ground. The Gamorrean was placed back on his feet with equal care. "Tell him the Force is awakening again. Tell him the Empire's days are numbered. Tell him to choose his allegiances carefully in the days ahead." Luke's young face was serene. "Now sit." All 4 guards sat, their eyes wide, their faces pale. The Weequay made a religious gesture. One human was shaking visibly. Obi-Wan moved past them toward the courier ship, his hand on Luke's shoulder. That was effective, if terrifying. "I learned from the best," Luke replied, climbing the boarding ramp. "You should have seen Master Yoda when he really wanted to make a point." The ship's interior was clean, well-stocked, clearly maintained for VIP transport. Obi-Wan slid into the pilot's seat, his hands moving across the controls with the ease of someone who'd flown countless missions during the Clone Wars. "Systems are green. Hyperdrive is charged. We have fuel for several jumps." He paused, his hands hovering over the ignition. "Last chance to turn back, Luke. Once we leave Tatooine, once we set course for Mustafar, there's no going back." Luke settled into the co-pilot's seat, his feet barely reaching the floor. "I left the point of no return the moment I woke up this morning with 60 years of memories in a 9-year-old's body. The only path is forward." He pulled Anakin's lightsaber from his pack, setting it carefully on the console between them. The weapon's presence seemed to fill the ship, resonating with echoes of battles fought and sacrifices made. "That's his," Obi-Wan breathed. "I haven't seen it active since Mustafar, since you took it from him after the duel." Luke's hand rested on the hilt. "We're going to give it back. Remind him who he was before the armor, before the pain, before the Emperor broke him and rebuilt him as a weapon." Obi-Wan engaged the engines. The courier lifted smoothly, repulsors humming, rising toward the open hangar doors. Below, the 4 guards remained seated, watching the impossible child and the Jedi Master escape with their employer's property. The ship cleared the hangar and accelerated into the night sky. Tatooine fell away beneath them. The Jundland wastes, Mos Eisley's sprawl, the dark desert dotted with moisture farms. Luke looked down at the Lars homestead, barely visible as a dark depression in the sand. "I'll come back," he whispered. "I promise." The courier broke atmosphere, stars surrounding them on all sides. Obi-Wan plotted coordinates, his hands steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. "Mustafar," he said, 6 standard days through hyperspace if we don't stop." "We don't stop," Luke confirmed. "Every hour we delay is another hour my father suffers. Another hour the Emperor's grip tightens. Another hour closer to the point where redemption becomes impossible." The stars stretched into lines of brilliant light. The universe folded around them, distance becoming irrelevant, time becoming fluid. They were committed now, no turning back, only forward, into the fire, into the darkness, into a confrontation that would either save Anakin Skywalker or destroy them all in the attempt. Luke closed his eyes, reaching out through the Force across vast distances. Somewhere in the galaxy, on a fortress world of ash and lava, Darth Vader meditated on his pain, unaware that his son was coming, accompanied by the brother he thought he'd destroyed, carrying the lightsaber he'd lost when his humanity burned away. The Force sang with possibility, with danger, with hope and terror braided together into a single destiny. In 6 days, everything would change. The galaxy held its breath, waiting. 6 days in hyperspace passed like a meditation stretched to breaking point. Luke spent most of his time in deep Force trance, preparing his 9-year-old body for what was coming. The confrontation with Vader would push him beyond any limits he'd tested since waking in this timeline. He built mental fortresses, compressed his vast power into tighter configurations, practiced techniques he'd learned from ancient holocrons that even Yoda had considered too advanced for most masters. Obi-Wan watched him with increasing wonder and worry. The child sat motionless for hours, his presence in the Force growing deeper, older, until the ship felt like it carried a slumbering giant rather than a small boy. On the 4th day, Obi-Wan couldn't contain himself any longer. "Luke, you need to eat. Rest. You've barely moved in 2 days." Luke's eyes opened, glowing faintly with residual Force energy, before fading to their normal blue. "I'm preparing. What we're about to attempt, confronting Vader in his own fortress, breaking through a decade of Sith conditioning, it will take everything I have, more than I should be able to channel in this body. Which is why you shouldn't push yourself before we even arrive. I'm not pushing, I'm weaving, creating pathways for the Force to flow through without burning out my nervous system." Luke stood, stretching small muscles that had been still too long. In my original life, it took me years to learn these techniques. Now I'm compressing that training into days. It's uncomfortable, Obi-Wan repeated flatly. "Luke, you're 9 years old. What you're doing would kill most Padawans." "Good thing I'm not a Padawan then." Luke's smile was gentle, meant to reassure. "Don't worry, Ben. I know my limits. I've died once already. I have no intention of doing it again before I've saved my father." Obi-Wan moved to the console, his face tightening. "We're approaching the Mustafar system, dropping out of hyperspace in 10 minutes. Luke joined him at the controls, his small hands folding in his lap, his presence in the Force suddenly compressed to near invisibility, a technique called Force stealth that even Jedi Masters struggled to maintain. "Can Vader sense us?" Obi-Wan asked. "Not yet. I'm shielding us both, but once we're in atmosphere, once we're inside the fortress, I'll have to let him feel me. Otherwise, we'll never reach the inner sanctum." Luke's expression grew distant. He needs to sense something powerful enough to investigate personally, something that makes him curious instead of just sending troops. The hyperspace tunnel collapsed. Reality reasserted itself in a rush of stars and darkness. And there, filling the viewport like a vision from nightmare, hung Mustafar. The planet was exactly as terrible as Luke's memories suggested. A world of fire and ash, its surface barely solid, its core barely contained. Lava rivers glowed orange and red across the dark landscape, visible even from orbit. Volcanic clouds churned in the atmosphere, shot through with lightning that had nothing to do with water vapor and everything to do with the dark side's corruption of the world itself. Obi-Wan's breathing had gone shallow. His hands gripped the armrests until his knuckles went white. "Ben." Luke's voice was soft but firm. "Stay with me. Focus on my presence, not your memories. I can't—" Obi-Wan's voice cracked. "Luke, I can't go back there. I left him burning. I heard his screams." I watched. Luke placed his small hand over Obi-Wan's. The Force flowed between them, warm, grounding, an anchor against the tide of traumatic memory threatening to drown the old Jedi. "You're not going back to Mustafar as the man who failed his apprentice. You're going forward as the man who's going to save his brother. This isn't the same moment, Ben. This is the moment where everything changes." Obi-Wan closed his eyes, breathing deeply, drawing on meditation techniques older than the Republic. When he opened them again, his hands were steady. "I'm all right. Tell me the approach." Luke studied the planet's surface through the sensors. "There. The fortress. Can you see it?" The structure rose from a volcanic plain like a monument to suffering. Obsidian towers, sharp angles, surrounded by rivers of molten rock that flowed in artificial channels, contained by dark side alchemy and imperial engineering. Landing platforms extended from multiple levels. Defense turrets bristled from every surface. The whole structure radiated malevolence so thick it was almost visible. He chose this deliberately, Luke said quietly. To punish himself, to meditate on his pain and failure. Every breath in that fortress is an act of self-flagellation. How do we get in without being shot down? We land openly, on the primary platform. Let them see us coming. Luke's fingers danced across the navigation controls with surprising skill. They'll report to Vader. He'll sense me through the Force once I drop my shielding. And he'll want to see what we are. That's optimistic. That's necessary. Vader's curiosity is one of the few Anakin traits that survive the transformation. If something truly intrigues him, he investigates personally. Luke engaged the sublight engines, bringing them into a descent vector. Trust me, this will work. The ship dropped into Mustafar's atmosphere. Heat immediately assaulted the environmental systems, struggling to compensate. The viewport filled with ash and smoke. Lightning crackled across the hull, dark side energy making the very air hostile to intrusion. Through gaps in the volcanic clouds, Luke caught glimpses of the surface. Lava flows, obsidian plains, the skeletal remains of the separatist mining facilities that had once operated here, and dominating it all, growing larger by the second, Vader's fortress. Now, Luke said, and released his Force stealth. His presence erupted across Mustafar like a star going nova, powerful, ancient, unmistakably strong in the Force. Not dark, not light, simply vast. In his meditation chamber deep within the fortress, Darth Vader felt it. Felt something impossible approach his domain. Something that made the dark side recoil and the light side surge in response. Something that felt simultaneously like a child and like a Grandmaster, like innocence and like power beyond measure. Vader rose from his meditation sphere, his breathing intensifying, his gloved hand moving to his lightsaber. What is this? The courier ship descended toward the primary landing platform. Guidance systems locked. Approach steady. Turbo laser batteries tracked it but didn't fire. Vader had given no order to destroy, and automated systems waited for biological confirmation before engaging. Stormtroopers scrambled into formation as the ship touched down with barely a whisper. 20 soldiers, weapons raised, forming a perimeter around the landing pad. Officers barked orders. Alarm klaxons echoed through the fortress corridors. The boarding ramp descended. Steam rose from the platform's surface. The heat was intense enough to make the air shimmer. Luke emerged first, his small form wrapped in simple robes, his presence in the Force like a beacon. He walked down the ramp with perfect confidence, his bare feet somehow unbothered by the superheated metal. Obi-Wan followed, his hand on his lightsaber, his face a mask of controlled terror. Every step on this cursed world brought memories crashing back. The duel, the lava, Anakin's screams. The stormtroopers' weapons tracked them. An officer stepped forward, his face pale beneath his helmet's shadow. Halt! Identify yourselves. This is a restricted Imperial facility. You are trespassing on. The officer's voice cut off mid-word as gentle Force compulsion took hold. You will let us pass, Luke said, his child's voice carrying absolute authority. We will let you pass, the officer repeated mechanically. You will take us to Darth Vader. We will take you to... The officer stopped, his training warring with the compulsion. That's not Lord Vader doesn't receive. He'll receive us, Luke said with complete certainty. Tell him a Jedi has come. Tell him I carry something that belongs to him. Tell him his past has arrived to offer him his future. A voice emerged, deep, mechanical, terrifying in its emotionless modulation. Let them approach. I will see these intruders myself. That distinctive breathing that haunted the nightmares of everyone who'd ever faced the Emperor's enforcer. Luke felt Obi-Wan flinch beside him. Through their Force connection, he felt the older Jedi's heart rate spike, felt the cold sweat breaking across his skin, felt the PTSD threatening to overwhelm a decade of hard-won stability. Ben, Luke whispered, with me, one step at a time. We're here to save him, remember? Not to relive the past. They walked through corridors of black stone and Imperial steel. Stormtroopers flanked them but kept their distance, as if afraid to get too close to the child whose Force presence made their heads ache. The fortress was a maze of sharp angles and dramatic lighting, every design choice meant to intimidate and diminish visitors. But Luke had walked these halls before, in memories stolen from Vader's own mind during their final confrontation. He knew every turn, every checkpoint, every location where his father had stood and contemplated ending his own life. The meditation chamber's doors loomed ahead, massive slabs of durasteel inscribed with Sith runes, radiating dark side energy that made the air thick and difficult to breathe. He's beyond those doors, Luke said. I can feel him, the pain, the anger, the loneliness. He looked up at Obi-Wan. Are you ready? No, Obi-Wan said honestly, but let's do this anyway. Luke placed both small hands on the doors. The Force surged through him, and the massive barriers swung open with a groan of protesting metal that echoed through the fortress. The chamber beyond was vast and terrible, a throne room carved from obsidian, lit by the orange glow of lava visible through transparestial walls. The heat was oppressive despite environmental controls. The dark side permeated every surface, every breath of recycled air. And there, standing with his back to them, looking out at the rivers of molten rock that had birthed him as Vader, stood Darth Vader himself. The armor was exactly as Luke remembered, black as a starless void, mechanically perfect, hiding the ruined flesh beneath. The cape hung motionless in the still air. The respirator breathed its eternal rhythm, the sound that had become synonymous with death across the galaxy. Vader turned. The mask regarded them, blank, expressionless, reflecting the lava's glow like polished obsidian. The breathing stopped. Complete silence for 3 heartbeats. Luke stepped forward, Obi-Wan behind him, both of them walking into the lion's den with only the Force as their shield. Hello, Father, Luke said, his child's voice clear and certain. I've come to bring you home. Vader's hand moved to his lightsaber. The weapon ignited with its distinctive snap hiss. Red blade, angry and bleeding, the color of pain given form. Kenobi, the word was venom processed through mechanical filters. You dare return to this place. You dare. Then Vader's gaze fell on Luke. Really fell on him. The dark side presence that was Darth Vader recoiled from the child's aura like darkness fleeing dawn. What are you? And I've come to save you from the man who destroyed Anakin Skywalker and built Darth Vader from his corpse. Behind Luke, Obi-Wan stepped forward into the light, his weathered face visible, his presence in the Force unmistakable. Anakin, Obi-Wan said, his voice breaking, please, listen to what he has to say. Listen to your son. Vader's breathing resumed. Ragged, irregular, the respirator struggling to compensate for emotional distress the system wasn't designed to handle. Impossible, my child died. Died with Padme. Died because Palpatine lied, Luke said firmly. About everything. About her death. About your children. About the future he promised you. He reached into his robes and withdrew Anakin's lightsaber, holding it out in both small hands. I brought this back to you. Your weapon, the blade you carried when you were a Jedi, when you were still Anakin Skywalker, husband to Padme Amidala, friend to Obi-Wan Kenobi, chosen one of the Force. The red blade wavered. Vader stared at the lightsaber, the weapon he'd lost on Mustafar that Obi-Wan had taken, that shouldn't exist in this impossible child's hands. Who are you? The mechanical voice carried something that might have been fear. What dark side sorcery is this? Just truth. Luke took another step forward, utterly fearless. Just a son who refuses to let his father die in darkness. Just a last chance for redemption before it's too late. The Force rippled between them, light and dark, hope and despair, past and future colliding in a moment that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Vader's lightsaber lowered fractionally, and in that gesture, that tiny, unconscious movement, Anakin Skywalker stirred beneath the armor, hearing his son's voice for the first time in a lifetime that hadn't happened yet. The silence in the meditation chamber was broken only by the respirator's rhythm and the distant roar of lava flows. Vader's red blade hummed between them, casting crimson light across Luke's small face. You dare invoke her name. Vader's voice was barely controlled rage. You dare speak of... He lunged forward, the lightsaber screaming toward Luke's neck. Obi-Wan shouted, his own blade igniting. But Luke didn't move, didn't flinch, simply stood there, his young face serene, his presence in the Force absolutely calm. The blade stopped a hand's width from Luke's throat. Vader's arm trembled with the effort of holding back, servos in his cybernetic limb whining under the strain. Why? Vader's breathing was ragged, irregular. Why can I not strike? Because you know I'm telling the truth, Luke said quietly. You feel it through the Force, the connection between us. The bond that can only exist between father and son. Vader staggered backward, his lightsaber lowering but not deactivating. His free hand rose to his helmet as if it suddenly weighed too much. No, my child died. Died with Padme on Polis Massa. The Emperor showed me her tomb. The Emperor showed you what he wanted you to see. Luke's voice was gentle but unyielding. "He's been lying to you for 10 years, Father, about Mother's death, about your children, about everything that matters. That name," Vader's voice rose to a mechanical roar, "that name no longer has meaning for me. I am Vader. I am the Emperor's servant. I am—" "In pain," Luke interrupted. "Constant, unending pain, physical and emotional. The suit hurts you with every breath. The cybernetics send feedback shocks through your nervous system. The respirator keeps you alive and makes you suffer simultaneously. And you've accepted it because you believe you deserve it." Vader went very still. "How do you know this? I've known you my entire life, my entire lives." Luke took a step closer, closing the distance Vader had created. "I know that the suit was designed by Palpatine to torture you, that it's deliberately uncomfortable, deliberately painful, to keep you angry and fuel your connection to the dark side. I know that you meditate on Mustafar because the planet reminds you of your failure, and you've convinced yourself that suffering is your only purpose now." The red blade wavered again. Obi-Wan watched in stunned silence as the 9-year-old child walked directly toward one of the galaxy's most feared beings, without hesitation. "Kenobi." Vader's mask snapped toward Obi-Wan. "This is your doing. Some trick. Some final revenge for—" "Anakin, please." Obi-Wan's voice cracked. "Look at him. Really look. Use the Force. Feel the truth." Vader turned back to Luke. Through the Force, he reached out, tentatively at first, then with growing intensity. He felt the child's presence. Vast, ancient, powerful beyond any Jedi he'd encountered, except perhaps Yoda himself. But underneath that power, underneath the impossible knowledge and skill, there was something else. A connection. A bond written into the Force itself, tying this child to Vader's own shattered soul. "Impossible," Vader whispered. "Improbable," Luke corrected with a small smile. "But not impossible. The Force allowed me to return, to come back to this moment, to save you before it's too late." He held out Anakin's lightsaber again. "Take it. Feel the Kyber crystal inside. It knows you. It's been waiting for you." Vader's hand moved almost against his will, reaching for the weapon he'd carried for years before Mustafar. His gloved fingers closed around the hilt, and the moment he touched it, memories flooded through him. Building this weapon as a Padawan under Qui-Gon's guidance, fighting beside Obi-Wan through the Clone Wars, the weight of it at his hip when he'd married Padme in secret, the last time he'd held it before Obi-Wan had taken it from his severed hand on the volcanic shores. Vader dropped the lightsaber as if it had burned him. It clattered against the obsidian floor. "I cannot," he gasped. "I am not worthy. That weapon belonged to a man I killed. A fool who believed in peace and justice, and he believed in love. He loved a senator from Naboo so deeply that the fear of losing her drove him to make terrible choices. He loved his master like a brother. He loved the younglings at the temple even as he murdered them because Palpatine convinced him it was necessary." Vader's breathing stopped again. When it resumed, there was a wet, choking quality to it. You know what I did. I know everything. The temple. The younglings. The Jedi you hunted across the galaxy. The worlds you've subjugated in the Emperor's name. The atrocities you've committed for 10 years. Luke's young face was filled with compassion rather than judgment. And I know you've hated yourself for every one of them. That the dark side doesn't bring you joy or satisfaction. Only the brief numbness of not feeling the guilt quite so sharply. Then you know I cannot be redeemed. That I am too far gone. That mercy would be wasted on the man who was once the best star pilot in the galaxy? Who won the Boonta Eve Classic at 9 years old? Who wanted nothing more than to free all the slaves because he remembered what it felt like to be owned? You know too much, things only Anakin Skywalker would remember, because I carry his blood and his Force sensitivity and his memories passed down through the bond we share. Luke placed his small hand on Vader's armored chest, directly over where his heart struggled beneath ruined flesh. And because, in another timeline, in another life, you told me these things yourself, right before you died, saving me from the Emperor. Lies, Vader said, but there was no conviction in the mechanical voice. The Emperor would never, I would never. On the second Death Star above Endor, he was killing me with Force lightning, and you chose me over everything else. Your power, your position, even your own life. You chose love. You chose to be Anakin Skywalker one final time. The sound of his armored joints hitting the floor echoed through the chamber like thunder. His breathing was erratic, the respirator struggling to compensate. "Padme," he whispered, "my wife, my angel. I killed her, I felt her die. I felt the moment her heart stopped, and I knew it was my fault. He knelt before Vader, bringing himself to eye level with the mask. That's the lie Palpatine told you. The lie he's maintained for 10 years to keep you enslaved. Obi-Wan stepped forward, his voice steady now. Anakin, listen. The Emperor has the power to manipulate life force through the dark side. A technique called Force Drain. He used it on Padme while she was in labor, while you were on the operating table dying from your wounds. He siphoned her life energy to sustain yours. Vader's entire body went rigid. She didn't die from a broken heart, Luke continued, his small hands framing the sides of Vader's mask. She died because Palpatine murdered her, drained her life to keep you alive. Then he told you that you killed her in your anger, made you believe it was your fault, used that guilt to chain you to the dark side for a decade. No. The word was barely audible. No, he wouldn't. He promised to save her. He said he lied, Obi-Wan said. About everything. About the Jedi plotting to overthrow the Republic. About me turning Padme against you. About your children dying with her. He moved to stand beside Luke. Anakin, you have 2 children, twins, a boy and a girl. They were born before she died, born healthy despite everything, and they were hidden from you and the Emperor to keep them safe. Vader's helmet turned toward Luke. The mask's blank face stared at the child who'd claimed to be his son. You, Vader said, you're one of them. I am. Luke Skywalker, son of Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala, brother to Leia Organa. Luke smiled through tears. I've been living on Tatooine with Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, your stepbrother and his wife. They've protected me for 9 years, waiting for the day when you'd be ready to know the truth. Owen, Vader breathed. Owen is, he kept my son safe. A sound that might have been a laugh or a sob emerged from the respirator. He hated what I was, feared my power, and he protected my child anyway. Because that's what family does, Luke said. They protect each other, even when it's hard, even when they're afraid. His fingers found the seals, the release mechanisms that he hadn't touched in years except for brief moments in his bacta tank. Anakin, no, Obi-Wan's voice was sharp with alarm. You need that to breathe. Without it, you'll... I know, Vader said, the first seal released with a hiss of escaping pressure. But I need to see him my son. I need to see him with my own eyes, not through these cursed lenses. Father, wait, Luke started, but Vader's hands were already working the other seals. The helmet lifted away. The face beneath was a horror of scar tissue and pale, wasted flesh. Vader's, Anakin's, true face, ravaged by Mustafar's fires, marked by a decade of suffering. His eyes, once bright blue, were yellowed with Sith corruption. His breathing was labored, wet, struggling without the respirator's assistance. But those eyes, damaged as they were, found Luke's face and locked there. You have her eyes, Anakin whispered, his real voice raw and broken from disuse. Her shape, but my chin, my stubbornness. He reached out with a trembling hand, touching Luke's small face with infinite gentleness. You're real. You're truly real. I am, Father. Luke leaned into the touch, tears streaming freely now. I'm real, and I'm here, and I'm not leaving without you. Anakin's face crumpled. The yellow in his eyes flickered. Yellow, blue, yellow, blue. The dark side and the light warring for control. His breathing became gasps, then sobs, his ruined chest heaving with emotion the damaged flesh could barely contain. I don't deserve this, he choked out. Don't deserve you, don't deserve forgiveness or redemption or... Stop. Luke's small hands gripped Anakin's face, forcing the broken Sith Lord to meet his gaze. Stop punishing yourself. Stop believing Palpatine's lies. You made terrible choices. You hurt people. You did monstrous things. But you're still my father. You're still Obi-Wan's brother. You're still the man Padme loved enough to die for. She didn't die for me, Anakin wept. She was murdered. Murdered while giving birth to you and your sister. And I never knew. I mourned her for 10 years, believing I'd killed her in all that time. His words dissolved into inarticulate grief. He pulled Luke against his armored chest, his broken sobs echoing through the meditation chamber. The dark side fled from him in waves, unable to sustain itself against the pure love flowing between father and son. Obi-Wan approached slowly, kneeling beside them both. Anakin, my brother, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I left you on Mustafar. Sorry I didn't find another way. Sorry I let you suffer for so long believing you were beyond saving." Anakin's hand reached out, finding Obi-Wan's shoulder. "You did what you had to do. I had become a monster. You should have killed me, should have ended it. Because this moment, this chance to save you, it makes every year of guilt worthwhile." They stayed like that, 3 figures kneeling in the obsidian chamber while lava flowed beyond the transparent steel walls. Darth Vader's fortress of pain became, for one impossible moment, a place of healing. Luke felt it through the Force, the darkness inside his father beginning to crack, light seeping through like dawn breaking through storm clouds. It wasn't complete, it wasn't instant redemption, but it was a beginning, a fracture in the Emperor's hold that could be widened, exploited, transformed into freedom. A holographic projector activated. Palpatine's withered face materialized above them, his yellow eyes surveying the scene with cold fury. "Lord Vader," the Emperor said, his voice dripping venom, "I sense a disturbance. You are troubled." Anakin's hand moved to his helmet, preparing to replace it to hide his weakness from his master. But Luke's small hand stopped him. "No," Luke whispered. "No more hiding, no more pretending. Choose, Father, him or us, the Emperor's chains or your family's love, slavery or freedom." Anakin looked between the hologram and his son, between the master who'd broken him and rebuilt him as a weapon, and the child who'd crossed time itself to save him. His hand fell away from the helmet. He stood supporting himself against Luke's small shoulder and faced the Emperor's projection with his ruined face exposed. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a soul breaking free from bondage. "No, no more. I am done serving you. Done being your weapon. Done letting you torture me with lies and pain and guilt for what you did." He gestured to Luke. "This is my son, my child, who you told me was dead, who lived while you made me believe I'd killed him, and I will not serve you one moment longer." The Emperor's face twisted with rage. "You dare, after everything I gave you, after I saved your pathetic life?" "You saved nothing," Anakin said, his blue eyes pure blue now, the yellow completely gone, blazing with righteous anger. "You murdered my wife. You stole my children. You built this suit as a torture device and made me believe I deserved the pain. You are a monster, Palpatine, and I am no longer your victim." Luke stepped forward into the hologram's field of view, his small face fierce with protective fury. "He gave you nothing but suffering. But I'll give you something, Emperor, a warning. My father is free now, and without him you're just a withered old man who's about to learn what happens when you torture slaves and expect them to remain loyal." Palpatine's hologram flickered, his rage almost destabilizing the transmission. "Then you have chosen death. I will come for you myself. I will destroy you both and make Kenobi watch before I end him too." "Let him come," Anakin said, strength returning to his voice with every word. Let him face the man he thought he'd broken. Let him learn that love is stronger than fear, that family is stronger than power, that the light will always overcome the darkness in the end. Silence fell in the chamber, broken only by Anakin's labored breathing. "He will come," Obi-Wan said quietly. "With everything he has, we need to leave. Now." "No," Luke said. "We stay, we make our stand here, on the world where Vader was born, where Anakin died, and where Anakin will rise again." He looked up at his father. "Are you with us?" He lifted the weapon, feeling its familiar weight, its rightness in his grip. "I'm with you, son, until the end." The 3 of them stood together, father, son, and brother, as the Force sang around them with hope reborn. Anakin collapsed against the obsidian wall, his breathing deteriorating without the helmet's support. His chest heaved with wet, rattling sounds, lungs damaged by superheated air on Mustafar, never properly healed, struggling to process oxygen without mechanical assistance. "Father!" Luke rushed to his side, small hands reaching for the discarded helmet. "You need this. You can't breathe without—" "Look at you, just a moment longer, with my own eyes." His gaze moved between Luke and Obi-Wan, drinking in their faces with desperate intensity. How long had it been since he'd seen another person without the red tint of his lenses? How long since he'd breathed unfiltered air, however agonizing? "Anakin, you're dying," Obi-Wan said urgently. "Your body can't sustain itself without life support. Put the helmet back on." "He's right," Luke said, though his voice carried reluctance. "We didn't come all this way to watch you suffocate. Please, Father." Anakin nodded weakly. His hands trembled as he lifted the helmet, positioning it over his ravaged features. The seals engaged with mechanical precision, the respirator kicked in, flooding his lungs with processed oxygen, and the familiar rhythm resumed, "Koo-pa, koo-pa," the sound that had become his heartbeat. But something had changed. The armor was the same, the mask was the same, yet the man inside was fundamentally different than he'd been 10 minutes ago. "The Emperor will bring his full might," Anakin said, his voice processed through the vocabulator once more. "Star Destroyers, Death Troopers, Inquisitors. He cannot allow my defection to stand. It would undermine everything he's built. How long do we have?" Obi-Wan moved to the chamber's entrance, peering into the corridor beyond. Hours, perhaps less. Anakin straightened, servos whining as his armor compensated for movement. He's likely already en route. Palpatine doesn't delegate when he's truly angry. Luke stood, his young face set with determination. "Then we prepare. But first, Father, you need medical attention. Is there a Bacta tank in this fortress?" "My private chambers." 2 levels down, Anakin gestured toward a concealed doorway. "But there's no time. If Palpatine arrives and finds me vulnerable..." "We'll guard you," Luke said firmly. "You've been in pain for a decade. Let us help you, even if it's only for a few hours. Please." Something in Luke's tone, the desperate need to care for his father, to ease suffering he'd witnessed in memories from another timeline, broke through Anakin's objections. "Very well. Follow me." They moved through corridors of black stone, past stormtroopers who snapped to attention and then froze in confusion. Their lord was walking with a child and an old man. Their lord's presence in the Force felt different, less oppressive, less terrifying. Anakin's private chambers were Spartan, a meditation platform, equipment racks, and dominating one wall, a cylindrical Bacta tank large enough to accommodate his armored frame. Control panels glowed with redouts, medical droids stood dormant in alcoves. "The armor must be removed for full immersion," Anakin said. "But the process is unpleasant. My flesh underneath is..." "I know what it looks like," Luke interrupted gently. "I've seen it. In my memories of the future, I saw you without the armor in your final moments. Nothing you show me will change how I feel about you." Anakin's helmet turned toward Luke, the blank mask somehow conveying surprise. "You saw me die. Saw you choose love over darkness even though it cost you everything?" Luke moved closer. "And then I saw you become one with the Force, peaceful and whole for the first time in decades. It was beautiful, Father. Your redemption was beautiful." Obi-Wan helped Anakin to the armor removal station, a mechanical frame that could detach the suit's components in sequence. The process took 15 minutes and revealed the extent of Palpatine's cruelty. Beneath the black plates was a body barely recognizable as human. Burn scars covered 70% of his torso, cybernetic limbs connected to nerve clusters with exposed wiring that sparked occasionally. The respirator's connection points had left permanent indentations in his chest. His spine was reinforced with durasteel supports that looked more like torture devices than medical equipment. Luke's small hands clenched into fists. Obi-Wan turned away, his face twisted with horror and grief. "This is what he did to me," Anakin said quietly, his unmasked voice barely audible. "Saved my life and made every moment of it agony. The suit's internal systems send feedback shocks through my nervous system. The respirator's pressure settings are just slightly wrong, making each breath uncomfortable, even the way the cybernetics connect. They're designed to hurt." "Why?" Luke's voice was thick with rage. "Why would he?" "Because suffering keeps me angry. Because a Sith Lord who's comfortable, who's at peace, might start questioning his master's authority." Anakin moved toward the Bacta tank with shuffling, painful steps. "He kept me in constant agony and convinced me I deserved it, that it was penance for my failures. And I believed him. The tank's fluid was already warming, turning from clear to the familiar blue-green of healing suspension. Medical droids activated, their sensors scanning Anakin's damaged body, cataloging injuries that should have killed him years ago. Luke helped his father into the tank, a surreal image, a 9-year-old child supporting a 6-foot cyborg's weight. But the Force flowed between them, strength passing from son to father, making the impossible merely difficult. Anakin sank into the Bacta with a sigh that was part relief, part anguish. The fluid covered his scarred flesh, began its slow work of healing what could be healed. His eyes closed behind the transparasteel of his breathing mask. "Rest," Luke said, his small hand pressed against the tank's exterior. "We'll watch over you. You're safe now." "Safe," Anakin murmured. I haven't been safe since Mustafar. Since before Mustafar. Since Palpatine first showed me kindness and I was too young to recognize poison wrapped in honey. Obi-Wan stood vigil near the entrance, his lightsaber in hand, his senses extended through the Force. Luke, what's our strategy when the Emperor arrives? We can't fight him conventionally. His power in the dark side is immense, Luke agreed, but not invincible. Palpatine's greatest weapon has always been psychological manipulation. He makes his enemies believe they're weaker than they are, that resistance is futile. But we have advantages he doesn't expect. Such as, he doesn't know I'm from the future. Doesn't know I've already defeated him once. Doesn't know that I understand dark side techniques he thinks are secret. Luke moved to the chamber's center, settling into meditation posture. And most importantly, he doesn't know that Anakin's love for his family is stronger than fear of the Emperor's power. Obi-Wan studied the child who spoke with a Grandmaster's wisdom. What do you need me to do? When Palpatine arrives, we face him together. All three of us. You and Father will engage him physically while I work on a deeper level, disrupting his connection to the dark side, creating barriers between his consciousness and the Force. It's a technique I learned from ancient Jedi texts. Very advanced, very dangerous, but it might give us the opening we need. And if it doesn't work, I've gotten good at that over 60 years. Hours passed. The fortress's automated systems continued their routines, unaware that their master had turned traitor to the empire he served. Stormtroopers patrolled corridors. Officers filed reports. Maintenance droids repaired minor damages. But the heart of Vader's domain was changing. In the Bacta tank, Anakin's body slowly healed. Burns that had festered for a decade began to close. Damaged tissue repaired itself cell by cell. It wasn't enough to restore him fully. The damage was too extensive, too old. But the pain lessened. The constant agony that had been his companion for so long, finally, mercifully dulled to a manageable ache. His eyes opened. Through the Bacta's distortion, he saw Luke sitting in meditation, the child's presence in the Force blazing like a sun. Saw Obi-Wan standing guard, the brother he'd thought lost forever. Saw hope made manifest after a decade of believing hope was a lie told to the weak. Tears mixed with Bacta fluid. For the first time in 10 years, Anakin Skywalker allowed himself to feel something other than pain and anger and self-loathing. He felt love. Luke's eyes opened, locking onto Anakin's through the transparasteel. The child smiled, warm, genuine, full of affection that asked for nothing in return. I love you, Father, Luke's voice whispered through the Force. I always have, even when you were Vader, even when you'd done terrible things. You're my father, and I love you. Anakin's response was wordless, a surge of emotion too complex for language. Gratitude, shame, wonder, and underneath it all, a tiny spark of self-forgiveness, fragile as a candle flame in a storm. The fortress shuddered. Alarms began to blare throughout the structure. Obi-Wan's head snapped up. He's here. I can feel him approaching through the Force. His presence is... He struggled for words, like a black hole, consuming everything. Luke stood, moving to the Bacta tank's controls. Father, we need you. Can you fight? Anakin's hand hit the release mechanism. The tank drained with mechanical efficiency. He emerged, dripping, Bacta fluid streaming off his scarred flesh, and moved to the armor station. I can fight. But Luke, if it comes down to a choice between defeating Palpatine and protecting you, you protect yourself, Luke said firmly. I'm not losing you again. Not to the Emperor. Not to sacrifice. Not to anything. We all survive this, or none of us do. Understood? Anakin's ruined mouth quirked into something that might have been a smile. You have your mother's stubbornness. I have yours, too. It's a family trait. Luke helped seal the armor back into place, each component clicking into position, transforming the scarred man back into the imposing figure of Darth Vader. But when Anakin lifted his helmet to replace it, he hesitated. I spent 10 years hiding behind this mask, hiding from what I'd become. Maybe it's time to face him as Anakin Skywalker instead of as Darth Vader. The helmet protects you, Obi-Wan pointed out, and helps you breathe. I know, but I want him to see my face when I defy him. Want him to understand that he hasn't broken me after all. That beneath the armor he forced on me, Anakin Skywalker survived. He set the helmet aside. Besides, I have a son to fight for now. That's stronger than any armor. The fortress shook again, harder this time. The sound of turbolaser fire echoed through the walls, an Imperial Star Destroyer bombarding the structure from orbit. He's not waiting, Obi-Wan said. He's coming in with overwhelming force. Then let's meet him, Luke said, igniting Anakin's lightsaber. The blade blazed blue, pure and bright. In the throne room, where this all began, where Vader was born, that's where Anakin reclaims himself. They moved through the fortress together, the broken Jedi, the old master, and the child who'd crossed time itself. Stormtroopers scattered before them, unwilling to stand in their path. Officers fled their posts, sensing something fundamental shifting in the Force. The throne room's doors stood open, revealing the vast chamber beyond. And there, descending from a shuttle that had landed on the private platform, came Emperor Palpatine. He wore black robes that seemed to absorb light. His face was a mask of withered hatred. His yellow eyes burned with dark-side fury, and his presence in the Force was exactly as Luke remembered, a void where light went to die, a corruption so deep it seemed to warp reality itself. "Lord Vader," Palpatine said, his voice dripping contempt, "you have disappointed me for the last time." Anakin stepped forward, his scarred face exposed, his blue eyes meeting the Emperor's yellow. "My name is Anakin Skywalker, and you no longer have any power over me." Luke and Obi-Wan flanked him, lightsabers ignited, forming a wall of blue light against the darkness. The Emperor's smile was terrible to behold. "Then you will die, all of you, and I will build a new apprentice from the ashes of your failure." The battle for Anakin Skywalker's soul and the galaxy's future was about to begin. Palpatine's Force lightning erupted before anyone could speak another word. Not a stream, but a deluge, white-blue energy that screamed across the throne room with enough power to vaporize Durasteel. The attack split into 3 forks, each targeting a different opponent with lethal precision. Luke raised his small hand. The lightning stopped mid-air, crackling against an invisible barrier, then dispersed harmlessly into the walls. The stone blackened where the energy struck, leaving scorch marks that smoked in the superheated air. Palpatine's eyes widened fractionally. "Impossible. No child could." "I'm not a child," Luke said, his voice carrying the weight of decades. "I'm a Jedi Master who's already defeated you once. You just don't remember it yet." He thrust both hands forward, and the Force itself became a weapon. Crushing pressure that sought to collapse lungs, shatter bones, pulverize organs. Obi-Wan gasped, driven to one knee. Anakin staggered, his cybernetics whining under the strain. Luke stood firm. Golden light erupted from his small frame, forming a dome that encompassed all 3 of them. The crushing pressure met the barrier and stopped, unable to penetrate the shield of pure Force energy that blazed like a miniature sun. "How?" Palpatine's voice was no longer mocking, but genuinely confused. "You're 9 years old. This level of mastery takes decades to—" "I've had decades," Luke interrupted. 60 years of training, study, meditation. 60 years of learning techniques you thought were lost. 60 years of understanding that love is stronger than fear." His blue eyes blazed. "And now I'm going to show you what a fully realized Jedi looks like." Anakin and Obi-Wan recovered, their lightsabers raised. They moved in perfect synchronization, the muscle memory of years fighting together during the Clone Wars returning as if they'd never been separated. Palpatine's lightsaber ignited, crimson blade emerging from beneath his robes. He moved with impossible speed for someone so ancient, his Form 7 technique. Juyo, a whirlwind of aggressive strikes meant to overwhelm through sheer ferocity. But Obi-Wan's Sorsu was the perfect counter. His blade wove patterns of defense, each movement minimal, each parry precisely calculated. Where Palpatine struck, Obi-Wan's lightsaber was already there, turning aside attacks that should have been impossible to predict. Anakin attacked from the opposite angle, his Form V strikes, so exploiting every opening Obi-Wan created. Their coordination was flawless, a dance perfected through 1,000 battles, each movement supporting the other. Palpatine was forced backward, his expression shifting from contempt to concentration. "You cannot defeat me. I am the dark side incarnate. I have studied the Force for 80 years, and we've studied you," Anakin said, his scarred face grim with determination. His blue blade met Palpatine's red in a shower of sparks. "I watched you for 10 years, Master, learned your patterns, your tells. Every technique you think is secret, I've seen, and now I'm using that knowledge against you." Luke didn't engage physically. Instead, he sank deeper into the Force, his consciousness expanding beyond his small body. He could see the dark side swirling around Palpatine like a storm. Decades of accumulated corruption, power stolen from the suffering of trillions, techniques that twisted the Force's natural flow into something monstrous. He began to weave barriers, invisible walls constructed from pure light side energy, cutting off Palpatine's connection to the dark side reservoirs the Emperor drew upon. It was like damming a river. The flow didn't stop immediately, but it began to slow, to weaken. Palpatine felt it. His attacks became fractionally slower. His precognition, the ability to see opponents' moves before they made them, grew clouded, uncertain. "What are you doing?" The Emperor's voice carried genuine fear now. "Stop. You cannot. You have no right to." "I have every right," Luke said, his small form glowing with golden light. "You corrupted the Force, twisted it, used it to cause suffering and death across the galaxy. I'm correcting that." Restoring balance, another barrier snapped into place. Palpatine stumbled, his connection to the dark side severing like a cut nerve. He fell back on physical skill alone, his lightsaber work still masterful but no longer augmented by preternatural awareness. Obi-Wan's blade found an opening. The strike burned across Palpatine's shoulder, cauterizing flesh, disabling his dominant arm. The Emperor's lightsaber fell from nerveless fingers. "No!" Palpatine thrust his remaining hand forward, summoning Force lightning from reserves Luke hadn't yet blocked. The energy crackled toward Anakin, seeking the cybernetics that made him vulnerable to electrical attack. Anakin didn't dodge, he simply raised his own hand and something impossible happened. He caught the lightning, bare-handed. The energy crackled against his palm, was absorbed, then redirected back toward Palpatine with twice the force. The Emperor screamed as his own attack struck him, burning his robes, searing his withered flesh. He collapsed to his knees, smoke rising from his body. "How?" Palpatine gasped. "Your cybernetics, they're vulnerable too." "Luke helped me shield them," Anakin said, advancing slowly. "Taught me a technique to ground electrical energy through the Force instead of through my mechanical components. I'm not the same weapon you built, Palpatine. I'm something better, something you can't control." Obi-Wan moved to flank the fallen Emperor, his blade at the ready. "It's over. You've lost." "I have not lost," Palpatine's face contorted with desperate fury. "I am eternal. I have contingencies. Clone bodies on Exegol. Sith cultists waiting to resurrect me. You cannot kill what refuses to die." "About that," Luke said, his child's voice carrying grim satisfaction. "I know about Exegol, know about the cloning tanks, the Sith Eternal, the Final Order fleet you've been building in secret." He knelt before Palpatine, his young face level with the Emperor's withered features. "And as soon as we're done here, we're going to find every single one of your backup plans and destroy them. You don't get to come back this time." Palpatine's eyes widened. You know too much. No Jedi could know these things. What are you?" "I'm the will of the Force," Luke said simply. "The instrument it chose to correct the damage you've done. And you're finished, Emperor. No more resurrections. No more corrupting the galaxy. No more turning good people into monsters." He glanced at Anakin. "This ends now." Anakin stepped forward, his lightsaber raised. The blue blade hummed inches from Palpatine's throat. For a long moment, father and would-be master stared at each other. "Do it," Palpatine hissed. "Strike me down in anger. Let hatred consume you. Prove you're still Vader beneath that pathetic redemption facade." "No," Anakin said quietly. "I'm not your weapon. I'm not even the Jedi I was before I fell." He looked at Luke, at Obi-Wan, at the family he'd thought lost forever. "I'm something new, something you never accounted for. I'm a father who loves his son more than he fears death, and that love has set me free." He lowered his blade. "I won't kill you in hatred, won't give you the satisfaction of proving your philosophy right." Luke placed his small hand on Anakin's arm. "But we can't let him live either. He'll escape. Rebuild. Start this horror all over again." "I know." Anakin's scarred face was resolute, "which is why this needs to be justice, not revenge. A choice made in the light, not the dark." Palpatine's laugh was bitter. "Justice. From you? You murdered children, Skywalker, slaughtered Jedi, subjugated worlds. What right do you have to judge me?" "None," Anakin agreed. "But I have the right to protect my family, to ensure you never hurt anyone else the way you hurt me, hurt Padme, hurt Luke and Leia." He raised his blade again, but this time there was no anger in his eyes, only sad resolution. "This is for the younglings, for the Jedi, for every life you destroyed or corrupted, for Padme." The blade fell. Palpatine's scream cut off mid-cry. The Emperor's body convulsed, dark side energy erupting outward in a final death spasm. Raw force power seeking escape, seeking to damage his killers one last time. Luke raised both hands, his small form blazing with light. The dark energy met his barrier and was transmuted, transformed from corruption to neutral force energy, then dissipated harmlessly into the universe. Palpatine's body collapsed, empty, lifeless. No spirit emerged to seek a new host, no consciousness transferred to waiting clone bodies. Luke's barriers held, trapping the Emperor's essence within his dying flesh, forcing him to experience true death for the first time in his long, terrible existence. The throne room fell silent, except for the distant roar of lava and the sound of 3 people breathing. Anakin deactivated his lightsaber, the blue blade vanishing. He stood over Palpatine's corpse, his scarred face unreadable. "It's done," Obi-Wan said softly. "He's truly gone." "Yes." Luke moved to his father's side, small hand finding Anakin's cybernetic one. "The Sith are extinct. The prophecy is fulfilled. You brought balance, Father. Just not the way anyone expected." Anakin looked down at the child, his son, his redemption, his second chance made manifest. "I don't feel victorious. I feel empty, relieved but hollow." "That's normal," Luke said. "You spent 10 years defining yourself by your service to him. Now that he's gone, you need to figure out who Anakin Skywalker is when he's not Vader and not Palpatine's slave. That takes time." "Time," Anakin repeated. He looked at his hands, one flesh, one cybernetic, both scarred by choices he'd made. "Do I have time? After everything I've done?" "You have the rest of your life," Obi-Wan said, moving to stand with them. "However long that is, and you have people who love you to help you through it." Luke squeezed Anakin's hand. "We need to leave this fortress. There might be Imperial forces en route. Officers loyal to Palpatine. We should get to the ship, jump to hyperspace, find somewhere safe to regroup." "Where?" Anakin asked. "Where in the galaxy could I go? I'm Darth Vader. Every planet knows my name, my crimes. I'll be hunted for the rest of my life." "Then we go somewhere they won't think to look," Luke said with a small smile. "We go home, to Tatooine, to Owen and Beru. Their family and family protects each other." Anakin's breath caught. "Owen hates what I became. Feared my power, he'll never. Sorry he was afraid of what you were instead of proud of who you were trying to be. And he said your mother would want you to come home." Tears streamed down Anakin's ravaged face. "Shmi, my mother. I never went back for her. Never saved her from the Tuscans. That failure is what started my fall." "Then make peace with it now," Obi-Wan said gently. "Go back to where it all began. Face your past. Build something new from the ashes of what you were." Luke tugged on Anakin's hand. "Come on, Father. Let's leave this place. Leave Vader behind. Start being Anakin Skywalker again." They walked through the fortress together, past stormtroopers who'd scattered or abandoned their posts, past corridors that had witnessed a decade of Vader's anguish. Behind them, Palpatine's body grew cold on the throne room floor. His reign ended by the very weapon he'd forged from Anakin's suffering. The Corellian courier waited on the landing platform, engines already warm. They boarded quickly, Obi-Wan taking the pilot's seat, Luke and Anakin settling into passenger seats. As the ship lifted away from Mustafar, as the volcanic hellworld fell away beneath them, Anakin looked back one final time at the fortress he'd built to punish himself. "Goodbye, Vader," he whispered. Luke's small hand found his. "Hello, Father." The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying them away from death and darkness toward a desert planet where twin suns waited to welcome the prodigal son home. In the cargo hold, secured carefully rested Palpatine's Sith holocron, evidence of his crimes, his techniques, his secret facilities. They would use it to find and destroy every contingency, every backup plan, every hidden threat the Emperor had prepared. The Sith were truly extinct now, and, for the first time in a generation, the Force was balanced. The galaxy didn't know it yet, didn't know the Emperor was dead, that Vader had turned, that a child from the future had rewritten destiny itself. But they would learn. And when they did, everything would change. 6 months later, the twin suns of Tatooine rose over the Lars homestead, painting the desert in familiar shades of amber and gold. Luke stood on the edge of the courtyard, his small frame silhouetted against the morning light, watching the vaporators begin their daily work. Behind him, voices drifted from the kitchen, Owen's gruff tones mixing with Beru's warmth. and underneath it all a third voice, deeper, scarred by old injuries, still learning how to laugh again. Anakin Skywalker had come home. The transition hadn't been easy. The first week, Owen had barely spoken to his stepbrother, unable to reconcile the monster called Vader with the awkward young man who'd left Tatooine decades ago. Beru had been the bridge, her gentle insistence wearing down Owen's walls, reminding him that family meant forgiveness even when it was hard. Now, 6 months in, something resembling peace had settled over the moisture farm. Luke turned as Anakin emerged from the homestead, his father moving with the careful deliberation of someone still adjusting to his cybernetic limbs without the armor's support systems. He wore simple farmer's clothes, practical, unremarkable, nothing like the black robes of Darth Vader. His face was exposed, scars visible in the morning light, but he no longer tried to hide them. "Couldn't sleep?" Anakin asked, joining Luke at the courtyard's edge. "Old habits. I used to watch the sunrise before meditation exercises." Luke smiled. 60 years of routine is hard to break, even in a body that's never done it before. They stood in comfortable silence, father and son, watching the desert come alive with the day's heat. Somewhere in the distance, a crate dragon called its territorial challenge. Closer, a dewback lumbered between dunes, searching for shade. "I spoke with Obi-Wan yesterday," Anakin said. "Through the encrypted comm channel. He's making progress with the Jedi survivors. Master Luminara is still alive, hiding on Kashyyyk. Master Shak Ti managed to escape to Felucia. There are others, scattered, afraid, but alive. And he's bringing them together, slowly, carefully, building something new from what survived." Anakin's scarred hands clasped behind his back. "He wants me to join him, help rebuild the Order. Says my perspective, someone who fell and returned, could help prevent future corruption." "What did you tell him?" "That I'd think about it." Anakin's gaze was distant. "Part of me wants to help, wants to make amends by teaching the next generation not to make my mistakes. But another part," he gestured at the homestead. "I missed this, missed simple mornings and honest work and family meals. I'm not sure I'm ready to give it up again." "You don't have to choose right away," Luke said. "The galaxy will still need Jedi in a year, in 5 years. Whenever you're ready." Beru's voice called from the kitchen. "Breakfast. Luke, Anakin, come eat before it gets cold." They walked together into the sunken courtyard. The kitchen was warm with cooking heat, smelling of grain porridge and blue milk, and the dried hubba Beru had rehydrated for protein. Owen sat at the table reviewing moisture readouts, but he looked up as they entered. "South Ridge vaporators need maintenance again," he said to Anakin. "Filters are clogged. Think you can handle it?" It was a peace offering, asking for help with the farm, treating Anakin as family rather than an infamous guest. Anakin understood, his expression softening. "I'll take care of it after breakfast." They sat together, 4 people around a simple table sharing a simple meal. Luke watched them, his aunt and uncle, his father, the family he'd died never knowing in his first life. Owen still had moments of discomfort, still flinched when Anakin moved too quickly or used the Force without thinking, but those moments were becoming rarer. "I heard from Bail Organa," Beru said, passing the porridge bowl. "A message came through official channels. He's asking about adopting a child." His sister, who in the original timeline had been hidden with the Organas from birth. "What did you tell him?" Anakin asked carefully. "That we'd discuss it as a family." Beru looked at Luke, then at Anakin. "There's a little girl, born around the same time as Luke was, to a family that, well, the details are complicated, but she needs a home, a safe home, away from Imperial attention." Luke knew the truth, of course, knew that little girl was his twin sister, but in this timeline, Padme had survived childbirth long enough to hide her daughter before succumbing to Palpatine's life drain. Leia had been placed in protective custody, her identity obscured, waiting for the right moment to be reunited with her family. "Her name is Leia," Luke said quietly, "and she's my sister." The table fell silent. Owen's datapad clattered against the table. Beru's hand flew to her mouth. Anakin's voice was barely a whisper. "Twin. Luke has a twin sister. You told me they were separated, but I didn't. I never asked. I was waiting for the right time." Luke met his father's eyes. "She's been safe with trusted allies, hidden from anyone who might connect her to you. But now that Palpatine is dead, now that you're free, she can come home too." "The Organas," Anakin said slowly, "Bail and Breha. They're good people. They loved Padme. They'd protect her daughter as their own. They have been protecting her, Luke confirmed, but they're willing to bring her here. Let you meet her. Let us be a family, all of us, if that's what you want. Anakin stood abruptly, moving to the window, his back to the table. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. Bonnie, what do you want? His voice broke. I want what I've never had, a family. Both my children alive and safe. A home that doesn't hurt to live in, a future that isn't defined by suffering and darkness. He turned, tears streaming down his scarred face. But I don't deserve it. I don't deserve any of this. Luke crossed to his father, his small hand finding Anakin's cybernetic one. Deserve doesn't matter. What matters is choice. You chose to turn back, chose love over hate, chose to be my father instead of Vader. That's enough. Owen stood, moving to join them at the window. For a long moment, he just looked at his stepbrother, this broken, scarred man who'd been the galaxy's nightmare and was now trying to be human again. Bring the girl home, Owen said gruffly. Both children should grow up here, together, with family. He extended his hand. Welcome back, Anakin. Truly back this time. Anakin took the offered hand, and Owen pulled him into an embrace. Awkward, masculine, but genuine. Thank you, Anakin whispered. Thank you for not giving up on me. 3 months later, a transport landed at the homestead carrying Bail Organa, his wife Breha, and a small girl with dark hair and fierce brown eyes. Leia Skywalker, 9 months old, looked around the desert with an expression that suggested she found it dusty and beneath her dignity. Luke felt her in the Force, bright, powerful, stubborn as a bantha in sandstorm. His sister, his twin, the other half of his soul. Hello, Leia, he said, approaching slowly. I'm Luke, your brother. He took her carefully, feeling the Force connection snap into place between them. Twin bond, unbreakable, written into the cosmos itself. Anakin stood frozen, staring at his daughter. Bail placed Leia into his arms gently. She's been asking for her father. Don't ask me how I know that. Babies don't talk, but I know. Leia, your mother chose your name, after her grandmother, a queen of Naboo who taught her that leadership means service. Leia grabbed his nose, yanked hard, and giggled. Despite everything, the trauma, the scars, the weight of crimes that could never be fully atoned for, Anakin laughed. Real laughter, bright and clear, the first time in over a decade that joy had touched him. The years passed. Luke and Leia grew up together under twin suns, training in the Force with Anakin and Obi-Wan, who visited regularly. They learned to navigate desert politics, to repair vaporators, to negotiate with Jawas and avoid Tusken territories. They were children of prophecy learning to be normal kids. Anakin worked the farm, taught his children, and slowly, painfully made peace with his past. He traveled to Coruscant once to stand before the Reformed Jedi Council and offer his testimony about Palpatine's crimes. Master Yoda, still alive in this timeline, listened gravely and said, "Atone you have begun. Continue you must." Owen and Beru watched their extended family grow with quiet satisfaction. The homestead that had once sheltered one hidden Skywalker now sheltered 4. Plus a frequently visiting Jedi Master. Luke, meanwhile, trained with the focus of someone who'd already mastered these skills once. By 13, he was a better duelist than most knights. By 15, his Force abilities made visiting Jedi whisper in awe. But he remained humble, patient, knowing that showing off served no purpose. Leia grew into her power differently, diplomatic rather than martial, her strength in reading people, in understanding politics, in seeing the connections between events that others missed. She was her mother's daughter in every way that mattered. On Luke's 16th birthday, Anakin presented him with a gift, a lightsaber crystal he'd found in the Jundland wastes, naturally attuned to the Force, perfect for Luke's first personal weapon. It's time, Anakin said. Time for you to build your own lightsaber, not as a child pretending to be a Jedi, but as the master you already are inside. Luke took the crystal, feeling its song in the Force. Green, not blue, a new color for a new path. Thank you, Father. That evening, Luke sat on the same courtyard edge where he'd stood the morning after Palpatine's death. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in reds and golds. Leia sat beside him, both of them comfortable in silence. Do you ever regret it? Leia asked. Coming back, changing everything? No, Luke said immediately. In the original timeline, you and I didn't meet until we were 19. Father died when I was 23. Obi-Wan was gone before I really knew him. Owen and Beru were murdered. So much loss, so much pain. He looked at his sister. "This is better. This is right. What happens next?" Leia asked. "You've saved Father, killed Palpatine, changed the timeline. What does the great Grandmaster Luke Skywalker do now?" Luke smiled, looking out at the desert that had shaped him across 2 lifetimes. "Now, I live, I train. I help Father rebuild the Jedi Order into something better than it was. I watch my sister become the greatest diplomat the galaxy has ever seen. I make sure the mistakes of the past don't repeat." He stood, offering Leia his hand. "And I appreciate every single moment of this second chance, every sunrise, every family meal, every day that you and Father are alive and well. That's enough. That's everything." They walked back to the homestead together, where light spilled from the windows and voices carried on the evening breeze. Anakin's laugh, deep and genuine, Owen's gruff commentary, Beru's gentle correction. Obi-Wan's visit had extended into dinner, and he was telling stories about the Clone Wars that made everyone laugh. Family, home, peace. Luke Skywalker, who had died a Grandmaster and returned as a child, who had crossed time itself to save the people he loved, who had rewritten destiny with nothing but hope and stubborn refusal to accept darkness as inevitable. He stood in the doorway and felt complete. The Force sang around him, balanced and whole. The Sith were extinct, the Jedi would rebuild, the galaxy would heal. And on a moisture farm on Tatooine, under twin suns that had watched him leave and welcomed him home across 2 lifetimes, Luke Skywalker smiled. He was 9 years old and 69 simultaneously. He was a child and a master. He was a son who had saved his father and a Jedi who had saved the galaxy. But most importantly, he was home. And that, finally, was enough. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.